All right, let's do a sound check. I'm giving people the opportunity to unmute themselves. Can someone just let us know you can hear us?
This is Nick. I can hear you.
Great.
Same here. Beck can hear
It's a
you.
good thing.
Beck, great.
It doesn't get you out of water, but it does narrow the area of this focus. Yeah.
I'm not gonna, I love all the demons. On that, so I'm not sure it's who it is. You're part of your life. There's such a thing as enough.
Yeah.
I love. Yeah.
I love leaving public people. That's great. First city mayor in 25, no.
Yeah.
This dog is attached to what appears to be a food container on the table.
Oh,
That's dope.
what do you have now? Oh,
He's very
it's chutney. Close enough.
You're.
Wow, you I'm
scavenging.
gonna close my door. It's a treasure trove for you.
Well, maybe we should meet before your meeting.
Thank you.
He was working.
That hurt this rumor.
It's gonna end badly.
If we want to talk about this. Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
Have your say, right? Raise your feet fast.
Give me 1 second, sorry, guys.
That's hilarious. You just took it out of my lunch.
The thing you.
Check on that one.
Got that. So.
He said, you're gonna be there in person, so I can do, I can do that.
Yeah. Want to shut that door so he stays in here?
Yeah, we don't want him to ruin it for everybody else. But yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
20 pages.
Sick. All right. We got it.
Okay.
And boundary. Welcome to Fast Planning for the March 18th Policy Board meeting. Let's go ahead and do a call to order. And then introduction of members and attendees. Want to run us through that?
Sure. Online, we have for guests, we've got Al Beck, Don Galligan, Kate Duber, Randy Bailey, Randy Warden, and Rates. And then for our online policy board members, we've got Nick Zarnacki in attendance. And then you want me to get to the table? Okay, sure. Starting with Lauren Little. Please.
Going little, Alaska Beauty, yeah.
Larry Church, Mayor of the City of North Pole. Scott Crass, Presiding Officer of the Fairbanks First Star Borough Assembly.
Jackson Fox, Director of Fast Planning. Briar Hopkins, Fairbanks Borough Mayor.
Ray Lunsford, Transportation Planner, Fast Planning.
Debbie Todd, Fast Planning. Corey Giuliano, Transportation Planner, Fast Planning.
Mindy O'Neill, Mayor of City of Fairfax.
Over here on the wall. Helen, want to say hi?
Ellen Spellman, Borough Planning Department.
Jack Farnell, News Minor.
Brett Nelson, Alaska DOT.
Kathleen Thompson, Alliance, please.
Thank you. Hi, Kevin. Thank you very much. So, the approval of March 18th agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? A second. Before we go ahead and vote on that, can I get a motion to move items 8A and B or just A?
A and B.
8A and B up to the before old business, so we can get Ms. Thompson as the CPA to give us her input, because we make that.
So can I modify just a little bit? I moved to move new business before old business.
That's the only new business we have.
We've got 4 things there that I think all of which were time sensitive for Jackson, make sure we got through. Community grants, the basics letter.
What did you make that motion?
I am moving to move all of 8 new business ahead of 7 new business.
I'll second that.
All right. If you want to vote on that amendment?
No objection.
Okay, no objections. All right, we're good there. So thank you for that. And then, is there any objection to the new amended agenda for item 3? No objections. All right, we're good. So we have amended the agenda, to put new business in front of old business. With that, we've got, item 4, approval of the February 25th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Move to approve the minutes from February 25th, 2026.
Moved by Mayor Turk, seconded by Mayor O'Neill. I'll give you that. And any questions, comments? Nope. All right, we're gonna go ahead and say there's no opposed. So approve the meeting's minutes. Number 5, staff working group report. Mr. Fox, take it away on page 14 of our packets.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hopkins. So a couple of items of note here on our staff report for March 12th, 2026 for activities that were undertaken since our last policy board meeting. First and foremost, underneath project and planning meetings, at the request of the policy board, we did hold a special meeting of the Walk, Ride, and Roll Advisory Committee on the Chain River Walk project. And they did develop a bulleted list of recommendations for this board to consider at today's meeting. And we will summarize those for you all underneath agenda item 7E. Also want to make note, we held steering committee number 3 for a metropolitan transportation plan update on the needs assessment for that planning effort and the base project list that we produced in-house here at Fast Planning, and we'll present a schedule update on that planning effort and the base project list on the agenda item 8E. Also want to make note, I did have a meeting with EPA Region 10 staff as a follow-up to my visit to Washington DC last fall on opening up the PM 2.5 implementation rule for the NAC standards on the Clean Air Act. They reported back to me, it was just kind of a light update, but that is still a live issue and the EPA is still motivated to open up those regulations for proposed revisions. However, they're waiting for a few more things to come in on their plate to open up the regulations, so it's a little bit more comprehensive. Also, I heard that there was an ongoing court case related to the PM 2.5 standards, and they want to see that resolved. They said either way, positive or negative, they still do intend to open up the regulations after that. But that might have implications on what they might be looking at in those regulation changes. So we agreed to do another status update for me in the fall timeframe on that issue. Okay, and then also want to make note at the bottom of this page here, we meaning Fast Planning, me as the director, and the other 2 directors of the other 2 MPOs, AMATS and MVP and Matsu. We did have a meeting with Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration staff for us all to discuss the lack of boundary approvals for Anchorage and Fairbanks and the expectations our federal partners have for our long-range transportation plan update and our next funding plan, transportation improvement program. But we have to have updates to both of those plans completed by the end of this year, December of 2026. And they have unanimously requested across those agencies and the resource divisions that we utilize our new boundary for those planning efforts, despite it not being approved yet by the governor. So that is our task, but we still don't know what yet will occur after January 1st. If the boundary is not approved by January 1st, 2027, it's possible all federal funding in Anchorage and Fairbanks will be frozen due to lack of a boundary approval. But they have reached back 3-4 decades and they have yet to find an example of this situation anywhere else in the country. And the regulations don't speak to what will or will not occur in the lack of a boundary approval at that time. So they don't necessarily have any guidance for us other than we are to utilize our new boundaries and capture any projects in those new boundaries in our next long range and short range transportation plans, which again have to be adopted by the end of this year. We also discussed the recent correspondence on NPO authorities between state DOT and Federal Highways and the Federal Transit Administration. Those letters are included in your packet today for discussion, so I can speak more to those later. Okay, next page. Under correspondence, DOT did release a pre-release draft of the 2027 through 2030 statewide transportation improvement program, or STIP. We were all given 6 business days to review that. I did spend the bulk of one day looking through that pre-release draft, and I did come up with some comments, which are included in your packet on pages 17 through 21 behind my staff report here. So I did submit some internal comments. Of course, there's not enough time to run comments through a technical committee or policy board, but the intent is for the 3 MPOs, our executive directors, and other folks that they shared it with to get eyes on it, to share any immediate concerns that hopefully will be addressed before the official draft STIP is released for public comment. I also, at the request of the policy board, I did email all the private property vendor applicants for the electric vehicle charging stations. Out of the 4 private property locations that do not currently have a landowner letter, I did receive one back from Three Bears out in North Pole. Did not receive landowner letters for Pikes Landing, the property off Helmers Avenue, or the private property off Santa Claus Lane. So, but I did get one for Three Bears. So we have that in addition to a landowner letter from the Fairbanks Daily News Miner for a potential PV site. And so we'll discuss that on the agenda underneath item 7D. And then also under correspondence, I did draft a letter of support to the congressional delegation for the Bridges and Safety Infrastructure for Community Success, or BASICS Act. And we'll take that up underneath item 8D. That did cycle through our technical committee earlier this month, and they did provide some good comments. I've made all the changes that were requested, and so we have a fresh letter before you here today. And then organization, we've completed our work on the independent audit, and Kathleen will present that once I get done with my staff report here, and we get through our public comment period. They've also prepared our draft tax return, our Form 990 for submittal to the IRS. The action on that here today is to authorize me as the director to sign that tax return so that they can submit it to the IRS. And then on public outreach, a couple things to highlight here. Staff, we met with College Rotary to discuss some collaboration opportunities. They are interested in doing some bus stop improvements, whether it's upgrading or replacing bus shelters or adding benches with some of the money that they fundraise with, but potentially some contributions from fast planning. So no federal money involved in these, such that potentially we could put together some, again, some bus stop improvements that may even be on private property, but utilizing nonprofit funds and fundraising through the Rotary. Also, we met with Barbara Johnson, who is a local artist that's been advocating for a number of years to get artwork on the Wendell Avenue Bridge and other locations throughout town. She did report to us that she secured a $10,000 grant through Doyon and has been working with Tanaka and the UAF art department. On that, Fast Pine staff, we will support her efforts with working with DOT on a beautification permit application. We started down this process a year or more ago, and we had funding in our office budget for this effort, but it was taken out of the office budget when we proposed it. But at this time, there's outside funding that's been secured, and Fast Pine staff hope to advance this with her assistance, the funding that she has acquired. Under funding, we did submit our Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP Amendment number 2 for DOT for incorporation into the STIP. On the DOT side, that's moved fairly quickly. I turned it into DOT Northern Region Planning. It was advanced to headquarters and to the commissioner's office to sign off on it. And as of Monday, it actually has been delivered to our federal partners for concurrence and air quality conformity determination. But we do have this back on your agenda today because the motion that was made at the last meeting only approved TIP Amendment number 2. But our federal partners would like to see some additional language on your preliminary air quality conformity determination. So I have a staff memo and I have a suggested motion for you all today to clean that up so that it checks all the boxes for our federal partners. And then we also have completed our draft of Fast Pine's new community transportation grant program. Just as a reminder, the board did authorize in our budget $20,000 for this first year for a community grant program to provide small grants to other nonprofits around town for transportation related projects at $5,000 or less. Those application materials and the schedule for that will be discussed on the item 8C. We do hope to begin advertising that grant opportunity in April 1st. And behind my staff report, beginning on page 17, are my comments on the pre-release draft of the STIP. I won't necessarily highlight all of these for you, but I did want to highlight some important ones. Comment number 1, in the statewide transportation improvement program, or the STIP, they have fiscal constraint tables. And as we've seen in previous round, none of the fund categories for federal highway and federal transit funds for our area in the STIP, none of those match what's included in our TIP. So Those two need to match exactly for those fiscal constraint tables. If you want to see how the amounts differ, that is included on page 19 of the packet. You'll see the spreadsheet for 2026 through 2029 of what federal money we have programmed in our TIP versus what's in this shown in the STIP. And again, every federal fund category is not aligned with our TIP. So we provided a link to TIP amendment number 2 so that those can be reconciled, but the STIP should match what we have in the TIP. Also, the PDF documents for the STIP are not searchable. I had to utilize Corey's expertise to convert the documents so that they would be searchable. But as the public is reviewing 300 pages of projects in this in the STIP, it would be helpful if it was searchable. So if somebody's looking for a particular project, they can find it. So we have workarounds, but the general public may not necessarily have those workarounds. Let's see, another one here is that we did find one project in the STIP, Connect Goose Bay Road Reconstruction, where 3.7 million of our federal funding has been dedicated to a project in the Mat-Su region. And you can see that on page 20 in your packet. Out of the 300 pages of projects in the STIP, this was the only one where we found some of our funding that was being programmed outside of our area. So that hopefully will get reconciled before the draft STIP is released for public review. It is just one error. I do think it probably was an error in selecting the fund code, but we do need to get that resolved so that our sub-allocation is not reduced by 3.7 million. And then the last one, I guess I'll highlight for you all, is that in the STIP, in the table of contents, we have the Chena Flood Control Bridge Replacement Project, but there is no project page for it. On page 21 in the packet, you'll see from STIP amendment number 2 from, I think it was last July. This is the project deep dive page for the Chena Flood Control Project. This page is missing from the pre-release draft of the current STIP, but want to make note that when this STIP is released, the expectation is this project stays in the STIP for now, but by the end of the year in December, this project migrates over to our MTP and TIP and will need to be removed from the STIP. So this is something that we need to follow because this board will have to consider adding this project to our next long range transportation plan and our TIP document. So hopefully that reappears. And then my last thing to report, page 22, are the action items from our technical committee on March 4th. They had 2 action items to consider. The first one was related to the Community Transportation Grant Program, and they unanimously recommended that the board approve the application materials and advertise the program to the public. And then the second one was the letter of support for the Basics Act to the Alaska Congressional Delegation. They had 3 amendments to change some of the language, to add some language to the opening statement, and then add some bullets to things that are currently not included in the Basics Act, but what we had requested of USDOT last fall when they issued a request for information. So all of the edits they requested have been made, and we do have a fresh letter of support for you to consider today for approval. And that concludes my staff report.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Fox. Extensive and interesting. Anybody have any questions or comments on it? Ms. Little?
I just want to comment, Chena Flood Control Bridge would not be in the new STIP because it was fully obligated in FY 25 fix. So the only time it would potentially need to show back up again is when we determined if we actually used AC, that we wanted to pay that back. Otherwise, the project's fully obligated. So that's why it does not show in the STIP. The new STIP is 27, 28, and or no, sorry, it was fully obligated in 25. So 26, 27, 28, 29 would not show funding for Chena Flood.
Just a quick question before I make sure we understand that. What is the AC?
Advanced Construct.
Okay.
So that's essentially the credit card. The state used the credit card for a portion of funding. I'm not positive if that actually happened or if it will come with it.
I saw it in here, so I just wanted to make sure I knew what it was. So that means the funding was fully put forward in 25.
Correct. So it would not show in
FY
a 26,
25, so it's written in 24. So it wouldn't show in the STIP because the funding is all there and it doesn't need additional dollars. Does it? Anybody have any other questions on that? Is that your understanding as well, Mr. Posh? Do you understand something differently?
So in this circumstance for fast planning, if we have a project that was obligated before a new tip cycle, we leave that project in case there's any increases during construction. You still have to have an active project in the STIP or in the tip to be able to apply funding to. So if say there's a cost overrun of 2 million, you've got to program that in the STIP or program that in the tip. So we always leave those projects open so that all of our documents are in order to add funding to the project if it's needed. Also, our understanding from STIP number 2 was advanced construction was used and funding was borrowed for a future year. So you need to show when you're going to convert that funding, basically pay back to credit card. So this is the practice of fast planning with our tip, and it directly relates to our fiscal constraint. And so my opinion is, even if there's no money in 27 to 29, it should be left in there as a placeholder for that AC conversion and for any construction increases that arise.
Ms. Lauren, Ms. Little, you disagree with that?
Construction increases would only need to be shown in a STIP or TIP if they exceeded the overall total project cost threshold.
What's that threshold?
The TIP is slightly different than the STIP. In the STIP, it would be, I think, 20% of the total project cost. So in the
20
case
million.
of is that an $80 million, $60 million, you would need to have a change order that was worth 20% of the total project cost to require it to be shown in a STIP or TIP.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on this? So I don't know
Just
the
explaining
answer.
why it wasn't shown in STIP. that's
Right,
all.
I understand that and I understand this. They both make sense to me. I don't know which is the right avenue for it. Do we want a discussion at the next one to see if, because I assume at this point, that means it will not be in the tip amendments, you didn't comment on the Connect Goose Bay one, so I assume that maybe that is an error.
Sure.
Cool, that works. So that might be out, but we'll need to track it still. Does anybody have any opinions on how we move forward with that decision if we want to see the Chena Bridge replacement? And it would be our tip, right? Because we'd be utilizing the new boundaries.
Yep.
So it wouldn't be at the month, it'd be the end of the year that we need to see that for the next one,
It will naturally come back up on the agenda in future meetings
because it'll be.
as we draft our next tip.
Okay.
Is there any issue with just leaving it on? Or whatever reason? That you see?
So the way the STIP is generated is from the project delivery plan. So the project delivery plan is gonna show planned obligations for whatever those fiscal years are. So we're gonna pull only data that, for projects that have obligations between 26 and 29. So our system will not pull that project because it doesn't have funding allocated to it in that system. So it would be very problematic for us in how we generate the STIP to put a project that has no obligations, no financial commitment in the new STIP. We'd be essentially I mean, if we did that, you'd need to see quite a few projects that are active in construction right now that are not in the STIP because they were fully obligated. This wouldn't have applied to just Chena Flood Control Bridge. So now if there was AC, depending on when we wanted to pay AC back, that would have to show up in a STIP or TIP, depending on
Would-
the time of that.
Would this mean that if you wanted to set, depending on when you wanted to pay the credit card back, it would be, that would need to be in the STIP? So does that mean that at this point, we're assuming the AC payment would be beyond the next STIP?
That or we didn't actually use AC to program it initially. It's entirely possible that we fully programmed that project up front with federal dollars to use AC. But I think for this group, if and when if there was AC, right? If it's between now and the end of the year, we would put that in our STIP if we plan to do it in our STIP horizon. It's after the boundary is approved. I wouldn't even say in the year. After the boundary is approved, we would be coming to this board, Jackson, for technical. This is when we want to pay the AC back, coordinating that process. If there are no additional obligations that require being shown in a STIP or TIP, the project would not come back before this group again.
You have a follow-up, Mayor? That's correct.
Yeah, and I can see how this would create issues if something that was not on our tip, we suddenly had to refer to. I agree that this will come up naturally. I think we'll have a while to chew on this topic. So I'm fine with it for now, but I appreciate the highlighting the issue.
Additional project details at the bottom of that page 21. It says, post 22 FY 27 ACC. I'm assuming that's repaying the credit card would be that 14.7. Is that what the conversion is? AC conversion? So that means eventually we'll need to pay back that 14.7 because that was where the AC funding came from.
That is what was shown in SIP Amendment 2. That does not necessarily reflect what was actually programmed on the project.
Okay, details.
So the STIP is a plan, and then when we actually submit the project development authorization to Federal Highways, that's the final makeup of what was obligated.
Okay. Mr. Crass, you're kick the can down the road and chew on it a little bit later might be,
I love kicking cans.
there we go. Alaska has a long storied history of it. Good to know. Everybody try to remember everything we heard here so we can understand what we'll need in the future and certainly understand both sides. Mayor O'Neill?
So I have two questions. The $3.5 million that's allocated to that Sue from fast planning. Although it may be a mistake, is that allowed?
No.
Okay.
It's the funding that's sub-allocated to the fast plan here.
Well, there's a point of clarification there. So the sub-allocation is for the population from 50 to 200,000. That incorporates MVP and fast planning. And so the state determines the allocation between the two groups. And so we have historically issued a split letter. And so while I'm confident that's a mistake, and if you look actually at the totals of the SCDG difference, it looks like it's about 3.7 million of STIP versus TIP. So that was an accounting error, but technically speaking, the state can determine where that total allocation goes, how it is split between MVP. That now we issue split letters, we have an understanding, so you guys can build your programming around that. But technically speaking, that money could be used in the MVP boundary. It does meet the criteria.
So, then, like, is there any concern with that? Doesn't sound like there is.
Not from my end, that was simply.
There, it's not like, you have concern with that?
I mean, if the state's able to just move around our MPO money between us and MVP, theoretically, we could get whatever the minimum would be, whether that's 0 or whatever the minimum is, and they get the other rest of it or vice versa. How is this not set out? Is there a way that it's set out as far as you or Mr. Fox know? That there's a concrete way to disseminate those funds.
And that's the department's agreement to the split letters, right? But from a federal highway standpoint, they don't have a rule of this is how you split it. That's left to the states and the NCOs.
We have a split by population that's already been agreed to upon by both MPOs and the state. So we have amounts that we've all agreed to at the table.
Okay.
So
Does it happen every year, or is that just,
we try to get a revenue forecast each year to update those calculated amounts, but we may increase by 2%, maybe 3% each year, based, adjusted for inflation, but it is a pretty straightforward formula that we've all agreed to use.
What's the time frame for understanding if this was an error or a reallocation?
We'll see if it changes between now and when the draft STIP is released.
Okay,
So this is also a comment from Matt Sue. This shouldn't be on this project.
okay,
So comments have come from us as well as Matt Sue that this money needs to get
gotcha.
moved back to the fast planning call.
Okay, so we don't really see a big issue with this, just somebody else saying.
That was the purpose of the pre-release draft, to see if there was any errors, mistakes. This is something I flagged. I don't think there's any devious behavior here.
Gotcha. My second question is, why is the STIP and the TIP different?
I have a guess, but I don't know. My guess is that they're pulling values from their PDPs, their project delivery plans, as opposed to our TIP. But I don't know that for sure. I don't know where the STIP is pulling those values from. So, but the values are not being pulled from our fiscal constraint tables in our TIP. there's 2 pages in our tip that you could look at and copy and paste over the numbers. So, I don't know how the numbers generated. I have a guess, but I don't know the mechanics or even who's working on this too.
Yeah, so within the project delivery plan, we have fund codes, right? So you saw like Pleasant Hill Bridge has highway improvement program, bridge fund, highway infrastructure bridge, and it's got a unique STIP ID. And so in the PDP for tip projects, we have a blanket STIP ID that's kind of a dummy to point back to the tips. And then within those fund codes, those fund codes get allocated to each individual project within the project delivery plan. And so it does create with the tips you'll have a tip ID, but for us, we have to have you under this blanket, you're fast. So we pull fast separate and those don't accidentally end up in the STIP. And it's just some procedural stuff that we're still kind of working things out that base that's leading to some of these things. There's still a lot of human input it's got to go in there that creates these little, and that's like Jackson said, that's exactly why we have this technical pre-review is let's catch as many of those technical errors as we can, and get those cleaned up, knowing that we'll continue to clean up those details up to final approval.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, do we know a timeline for that final approval or when we'll see an update on these?
The original goal was public comment, open for public comment March 15th. So at any day, we should see that step out for the 45 days public comment period.
And should these numbers in the Goose Bay thing be fixed by March 15th,
I'm sure that's why it hasn't come out today, is that
3 days
we're
ago?
making sure we're catching those things.
Okay,
It's
that's
not gonna
not
be
fine, yeah,
perfect.
yeah, no, that's fine, yeah, I, for some reason, thought it was the 14th, so that works, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, any other questions on the staff report? Okay, well, thank you all, and with that, we're gonna move on to the public comment period. Do we have anybody online for public comment? Anybody online would like to pipe up for public comment?
This is for anything not listed as an action item.
Anything not listed on as an action item? Sounds-
Online.
Seeing none. All right, well, thank you, everybody, for attending. Oh, anybody in the room? Thank you. No, all right, thank you. And with that, we have a reordered, and I'm gonna close public comment. With that, I'm going to, we have a reordered agenda and we're moving new business up to now. Ms. Thompson, would you like to step to the hot seat, here?
Any empty
Or,
area?
like, that one works, do that one. Thank you.
Kathleen Thompson, Alliance CPAs. Know a lot of faces in here, but if anyone does not know my face, I'm the partner in charge of your audit. And I'm here to present today. We have 4 documents in your packet. We have the financial statement report, 2 letters, and the 990. This first letter is a letter that's a required communication. It's got. If you want to go to the next page. Okay. Basically, it says, it outlines key audit areas and key things. That we audited your financial statements, accounting practices and disclosures. Highlights which ones might be sensitive and if there were any difficulties with the audit, which we did not have. On the next page, whether or not there were corrected or uncorrected misstatements in the numbers, disagreements with management. That would be if we disagreed on how to account for something, which we did not have. Jackson signs representations that said that he gave us everything we requested, among other things, and whether or not there were consultations with other independent accountants, which there weren't. And that's just kind of a, make sure that all the parties have all the facts. And then the next page, this is a communication of internal control related matters. There weren't, go to the next page, there weren't any. It highlights for you some definitions that we use deficiencies in internal controls exist when the design or operation of your internal controls don't allow management or employees to find them in the course of their normal duties. And significant deficiencies in material weaknesses could be one or several combined. However, we did not identify any material weaknesses at Fast Planning. So then we go to your financial statements. And we start with our reports. Well, this is our opinion, in the first paragraph that we audited, Fast Planning's financial statements as of September 30th, 2025, and the related statement of activities, changes in net assets, functional expenses, and the cash flows for the years then ended, sorry. And that are, in our opinion, they present fairly in all material respects, your financial position as of September 30, 2025 to 24, and the changes in net assets and cash flows for the years then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, which is referred to as GAAP for us accountants. Our basis of opinion, this tells you that we audited, conducted your audit in accordance with auditing standards that are generally accepted in the United States and America. Our responsibilities and your responsibilities are aligned here. We're required to be independent of Fast Planning, and we believe that we are, and that we have enough audit evidence to present our opinion here. Management is responsible for the preparation and presentation of the financial statements. And we make sure that they are free of material misstatement. On the next page, points out that management has to evaluate whether or not there's substantial doubt that Fast Planning can continue as a going concern within 1 year of the date of the financial statement's ability to be issued. Our responsibilities for the audited financial statements. So these are the things that we do. We have reasonable but not with assurance, but not absolute assurance. We can have a properly planned audit and still not be able to detect a material misstatement. And that risk is usually the result from fraud or something else where they have collusion and omissions. But we plan our audit to try and find those things if they exist. We use professional judgment and skepticism throughout our audit. We identify and assess risks of material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. And that's how we design our audit procedures to respond to those risks. We obtain an understanding of your organization's internal controls so that we can design our procedures accordingly. And we evaluate the appropriateness of your accounting policies and the reasonableness of significant estimates when they exist. And conclude overall whether or not we agree with Fast Planning's ability to continue as a going concern. And so that is the end of our report. The key thing was on the very first page, which was, in our opinion, your financial statements. Is that fair? The next page 4. So this is a picture of your financial position as of September 30th, 2025, compared to 2024. And you see unrestricted cash increased. Overall, your current assets decreased. That's the big thing there was last year, your grants receivable had actually 2 months in it behind. So this year Only 1 month is there in grants receivable, but other than that, there weren't a whole lot of changes. You did have some new equipment purchase, but you also got rid of some equipment. Overall, not large changes. Reminder that the rights of use asset, lease and liability is putting on to the books your right to use this space. So it's kind of it's clearly it decreases every year because of one more year through your lease. So that's what remains of the asset and the liability. Other than that, in your current liabilities, not large changes, and overall, net assets and liabilities and 1.1 million. There's any questions? The next page is your statement of activities. So where your revenue's coming from, and the big change here was the decrease in the federal fund passed through the state of Alaska. Overall, a decrease in your net assets of about almost 19,000. Any questions?
Do you know what caused the decrease of the federal pass-through?
Decrease to indirect cost rate, I think, and also.
We had Kim Sully on our payroll
Okay.
over Matsu, and so she was additional revenue for our office. And
Yeah,
she has since left employment as of April.
April, right, so the reimbursement for her salary went elsewhere.
Makes perfect sense, thank you.
All right, page 6, is what's called the functional expenses. And that is basically taking your expenses and allocating them between program or management. And that you see them by natural category. And if you were looking at them on your piece of paper, you might want to look at page 6 and 7 comparatively, because that's where you can see the difference between how 2024 and 2025 look. Overall, you have an increase of your expenses, some of which was most is related to the salaries, and I think that just is also Kim, as you mentioned, because she was here through the full year to April. And I think in 2024, it was only a part of the year,
Yep.
right?
Correct.
Yeah. But it's just a breakdown by category and whether or not it's considered program or management. Kind of any questions on that? On page 8 is a cash flow statement, and that is where you received your cash from and how you spent it. It's so it has the different funding sources, and that you pay the money that you get out. You purchased some equipment for an overall increase in your cash of 82,000. And it also breaks down which portion is unrestricted versus designated. And on page 9, it reconciles your changes in net assets, which is like your net loss that we talked about earlier of almost 19,000, back to the positive cash flow of 82. And that works through the different pieces. For example, depreciation is a non-cash expense. So you have first your non-cash expenses, then decrease your revenue, and then the grants receivable. So the decrease in the grants receivable, that was income that you reported as revenue last year that you received the cash this year. So that's why it's a positive increase there to get you up to the 89,000 cash provided by operating activities. And then it notes that you donated the fixed assets to Matsu. On page 10, start your notes. And I'm gonna just high level here. If you want to read through them, you can. There weren't any changes to these policies. So they're not any different than your last year. The first place on page 2, on the next page, sorry, not, at the very bottom is your cash note, which talks about, your, how much was insured and collateralized and how much was not at the end of, at September 30th, 2025. But remember, this is a picture in time there, talking about September 30th, 2025. At the top of page 12, you have your grants receivable note, liquidity and availability of financial assets. Next page there. Yep. So how much cash you have available for your expenditures in the next year. Your outlines, note 5 outlines your designated net assets that you agreed upon. And on the next page, at the top, you have the equipment, your retirement plan information, the lease obligation tells us how we calculated, how management calculated the liability and asset of the lease. That's it. Unless you have questions.
All right, I do not see any questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Thompson. Are you on for the IRS Form 990 discussion, or is that?
Yes.
Okay,
That is me as well.
all right, no questions, correct? All right, no questions. Let's move on to our IRS 990 form, where we will have an action item following this discussion.
Go ahead and scroll through it so we get to the very first. Go ahead. Let's keep going. Page 1, one more back. Sorry, there we go. Okay. So the important thing to remember about a 990
And that, all right, so that's page 154. Yes, those backs, okay.
is that it's not an income tax return like everyone else is filing right now. It's an information return is its piece. And so there's a lot of stuff on here that is not numbers. So that is the one high level there. We do have a summary on this first page, but on the next page, you have information about your mission. You have information about your expenses and your program stuff relation. And I'm not gonna go high level into, just high level on the numbers because these numbers are coming first from the financials, so you've already seen them there, but you see that you have to tell the IRS how you spent your programming funds. And then on the next page, these are just schedules, so keep going through the thing that we get. So, yeah. Yeah. Some of those questions are things like, did you file your 1099s? Were you required to file? How many did you file? How many board members? Things like that. And on the next page, this is probably the first one that really gets into your governance and your policies around governance. Like, do you have a conflict of interest policy? Do you take notes at your meetings? And these are all things that we have to tell the IRS annually, which we do. And then these questions have been answered according to how your policies are. And then on page 7, this is where we list you guys, and we also list the Jackson as the chief executive. And then you have to put salaries there too. And on the next page, I keep going, sorry. And so then we go into, this is where we do our numbers. So now we have revenue. Whereas in financial statements, we always like the balance sheet first, and then the revenue, and then the expenses. They have the revenue first, and then the expenses, and then the balance sheet. So all information you already have, and as a more simplistic 990 in the sense that your funding sources are limited, you don't have a lot here because of the fact that they're all up in the top. Don't have program surface revenue and the other types of revenues that can make a 990 more complicated. And so then go ahead and keep going here. Yep, those are your expenses, this is your balance sheet. And then, again, a reconciliation to, financial statements, and we tell the IRS that you did have an audit. And that you did not need a single audit. And that is the end of the basic 990. After that, you have your Schedule A, which is on the, see, on the second page, keep going, this, one more page. Has your public support percentage, which is 100. That this is, like I said, because of your funding sources less critical than someone, an organization that might not have 100% federal or public support. And then if you keep going, the next schedule is, lots of these don't even apply in Schedule A. Going to Schedule B.
What page are we on there? 172?
72.
Keep going. There we go. On the next page, 74.
174. You need a chime.
175, go to 175. This is where you have your schedule of contributors, which of course the biggest one is, and it's the one only that needs to be reported, is the state of Alaska. And that is basically it. For Schedule D, which you'll see in the back if you wanted to look at it, just gives the details of that balance sheet item, the balance sheet. And it says in there that your note, which comes from the financial statements, so it's just a reconciliation to the financial statements. At the very back is Schedule J, and that just is information about how you determine the salary for your officers, which has to be completed when salaries are above 150, compensations above 150. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Thompson. Any questions? Mr. Kress?
Thanks. On page, our page 159, your page 6. I noticed it doesn't refer to fast planning, it refers to the organization. At the bottom of the page here,
Yeah.
under 20, is that practice I'm not aware of, or?
It's just the standard, if the books are in the care of the organization, which they are.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if it was that or, an autofill.
No, it's, you could put a name of a person, but typically when it's it's not Jackson, it's the organization
I
that
see.
has control of the books, right? Because Jackson could leave, or,
Mhm.
it's your organization that has control of the books.
Thanks. And the other question I had was, when are these due? I know we're on a different fiscal year than me filing my, that's whatever.
This is due in August, I think. So it was due in February and we filed an extension. Because we weren't done, I think it's February. And then we filed an extension, so it's actually August 15th, I think, that it has to be filed by.
Thanks.
Okay.
It's for a nonprofit, it's 4.5 months. It's the first due date. And then you can get an extension for 6 months. So that puts you almost to the end of the chance to listen.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. We have, we need an action item on this to authorize, Mr. Fox to file this form with the IRS. We have a motion for that?
Public comment first.
Oh, thank you. Public comment on that. Do we have any public comment on the tax and audit response? Anybody online? Seeing none, anybody in the room? All right, nobody in the room either. So, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment. Thank you for that reminder. And, with that now, do we have, any comments or questions from the board? Any discussion?
This is, in my experience, this is as glowing of a review as you can get from an auditor. So nice work by the organization.
All right. Fantastic. With that now, do we have a motion to authorize management and Mr. Fox to file this for the IRS?
I move to authorize Jackson Fox as executive director to file our Form 990 IRS.
All right, motion by Ms. Little, seconded by Mr. Kraft. Thank you very much. Ms. Thompson, thank you so much for working in, and say hello to Steve for us.
I will do that.
Hope he's doing well out at Harding Lake. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. We are still on new business as we move the entire item forward. We're on to item C. Fast Community Transportation Grant Program, page 189. We'll have an action on this. Mr. Fox, can you give us a review of what we're looking at for page 189, if that's in your?
Yeah,
house?
I'll start us off here and then turn it over to Corey to kind of walk you through some of these materials. But we had presented the draft application materials scheduled for advertisement and scoring rubric at our last meeting. That was just an informational update to say that this was coming. We did run these documents through our technical committee, and we did get some comments at their last meeting and made those revisions that were requested. And so we have a polished package for you here today to consider approving these application materials and authorizing us to advertise the grant program. Corey, would you like to walk through the documents in the packet?
Certainly. So, everything in the packet is essentially the bones of this program. We've got a website that we've worked on too, that we'll toggle over to after we go through the paperwork side of it, but just high level, we've got $20,000 set aside for individual grants. We kind of advertise them as being matching grants, 10% match by the organization that's applying. The scope is very broad because it's a pilot program. We want to see what the community is interested in doing. But we also don't want to close the door on some things that we may not have considered. So we're intentionally light on guardrails, and we just want to see what kinds of proposals come in. If you look at the grant program timeline, the hope here is to have you all approve this for, opening to the public. We'd have a 4-week open period in April, and then projects could start as early as May. Again, to give an idea of what we're anticipating, this could be something as simple as a PTA procuring helmets or reflective vests for a classroom, or this could be a group like Girls Who Weld buying materials to build benches. It's just very broad. It can be a soft program or more like kind of brick and mortar one. The follow-up then is after they do this process, whenever their kind of pencils down is, there would be a final report within 30 days of that, application of whatever their program is, and then a 1-year follow-up and kind of check-in for documentation. And that we'll use that information to refine our program and make any adjustments. If you can go next page. This is an outline of the website, and we'll hop over to that at the end. But it gives you an idea of what's there. On the website, you'll be able to download the letter to applicants. That's all of this is trying to be written in a very approachable tone. We're light on technical terminology, but it's essentially letting people know what they can apply for. Next page. 11. Yeah. So after your applicant, if you go to the next, it just gives a little more description of what's required. So in this case, a cover letter. 2 forms that they would need to fill out, the application, which is included in this packet, as well as a memorandum of understanding between FAST and the applicant. There's a proposed project budget that we'd like to have in hand. That can be light, but just provide some guidance on what we're looking for. We're not administering the application of their funds. We're not doing procurement for them or any of that. This would be a check that's written to their organization. And then project timeline. Proof of nonprofit status. This is something that we went over with the technical committee, and I'll show you some modifications we made based on their feedback. And then supporting materials, maps, drawings, letters from the community, et cetera, to just show that this is really a kind of broad lift, and that there's support from partners. Go to the next. This is the application. There's both an online version and a paper version of this. So we wanted to keep it flexible for, folks that want to come in and potentially fill this out with us in our office. We can assist them in doing that. We're anticipating that we might have, a wide range of applicant ages and specialties that do this. So we want to keep it accessible. Next page goes down through the types of questions that are asked. I'm sorry, did you go to MOU already?
Well, I just finished,
Oh, okay, great, yeah. So that's the application. The MOU just simply explains that, you know, we're providing this money, but they're providing any kind of maintenance if this is a piece of physical infrastructure. This came from conversations with Jerry Cleworth about a year ago, where his concern was on an example project. The Children's Museum asks for funding to put some bike racks or some play equipment, musical things that enhance kind of the public space outside of their building. The city was concerned that this is more specialized equipment that we'd be called on to maintain because it's in our road right away. Well, an MOU would address the kind of path and responsible like parties in that, so that the city is the first one that gets the call if something gets damaged or vandalized or comes loose or is hit by a snowplow. So that's here to help just establish responsibility. And then there's a couple signatures at the end of that, next page. And then the final is the scoring rubric. So this process would be scored by our project enhancement committee. We tried to give outlines on the weighting of scoring, and again, this is included in the project so that people know like what it would take, what kind of information they want to provide to get a higher scoring proposal. We're hoping that this, again, it's only six different line items that this is scored upon, and our hope is that it's pretty straightforward. And I believe that's it. So if you want to hop over to the webpage, and then we'll do questions. So where's this nested? This is tucked into our Keep Up With Us, and we've got a new section under grants.
I'll have it under the resources tab once it's fully
Great.
published.
All right, thanks. We've already had community members reach out asking about this, so our hope is that we'll be able to share this webpage out, and this connects into the resources. So
These are gang members, clearly.
they are.
It's all right,
Like
yeah.
from the Fairbanks game.
The friendliest gangs.
The tall guy there is the gang leader of the year for Alaska.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's Pete Daly. This is sort of a soft launch of this program that we did last year. We bought up the materials for them, and they built bike racks. We've got one in the ops here, and you've seen them string around. So here's the packet. It's just real high level, just the kind of hook to let people know, what this is. As soon as they download the packet, the application is the first thing, and that's meant to give them information about whether or not what they're looking for really applies. So we want people to do some self-sorting. If they don't apply and it's a truly private business, they have no partnerships, we don't want them to waste their time, putting in the submittal. So anyway, this is the content. Olivia helped put together the website, and I think it's super clear, and it gets them right to the materials. So with that, I guess I want to open it up and see if there's any questions about this program, thoughts or feedback.
Questions from the audience? Yes, Ms. Little?
So a few things, one, just in the criteria, I think economic development should be mentioned. Just in that broader equity, usability, use for economic impact. I think we should lose sight of that. It looks like we're requiring match for these.
Mhm.
Is that really worth our time in accounting for such a low dollar activity?
I think that our hope was that we're showing that they have some skin in the game, and if you go to, I think it's the, if you can go to, it's page, oh gosh, sorry, the letter to applicants, Olivia, scroll up a bit. It's under the application materials checklist, and it's item number 3. All right, so if you can zoom in on that. So there is a 10% match, but we've got an asterisk there. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, we do say that match could be volunteer hours, sweat equity, like there's different ways that they can describe what that is. So what we want is just some level of buy-in from the folks doing it. So we know they're not just gonna buy some stuff off Amazon and then scatter it around. Like we wanna see that they've got some buy-in, whether that's physical, time, social capital, et cetera.
I understand that, but we're a quasi-government agency and you put a 10% match. So now someday we have to justify that. So in my world, like if I want to do in-kind match, the paperwork I have to do with federal highways is not insignificant. And I realize they're not a participant to this, but is there a softer way of saying, show us your contribution as opposed to provide a 10% match?
Oh, I guess that was my understanding of what this does. If someone applies for a, they're gonna do $1,000 project, then they're gonna kick in $100 and we're gonna give them 900. That's like the intent of how the accounting would happen. It's not that, is there some other method, or maybe you could help clarify?
Did you guys like work with the accountant on that, like run it by so they could flag it?
I don't,
She just left.
like, I'm misunderstanding this. My thought is just that they provide the overall budget and we're just giving them 90% of what their proposed project value is.
I would say the way this is written could make that administratively challenging, so you might just consider wordsmithing that a little bit as opposed to 10%. You could simply say, we will fund up to 90% of your project cost. Alternatively, project cost estimate. Just some ways to kind of keep yourself out of something ends up being really hard to manage.
I think the intent's good, since it's a scored, I mean, you have a rubric built out, you can keep the rubric without specifying that, a dollar amount, just like if you refer to it as opposed to a 10% applicant match, like organizational contribution, and then list some of the ways that like the 10% match, or and kind of start from that more like we want, start with we want skin in the game part, and then say one of them could be a 10% match. That might, let some organizations with low funding and high amounts of volunteering community engagement be more apt to jump in. I know funds are scarce now, so sure. I think even a 10% match might scare some people that would be a good fit for this.
I'm with Ms. Little, especially on the paperwork. I think it's okay if I kind of like the idea of we will fund up to 90% of the program. Instead of requiring the match, if that reduces the paperwork level, I'm already thinking of people to tell this to, so.
Well, is there,
Yeah,
is there clear direction that we can have on this? Cause I hope to not bring this back again to another policy board for approval and delay it by a month. Jackson, maybe you could help thread a needle on what's the language that we should do to meet the suggestion?
I think we understand the suggestions, so we'll change language to fund up to 90% of the project. But we need to see receipts or a letter. Hey, we put in 30 hours of work at $20 an hour to meet our 10% match commitment. And then we just need some documentation on their side for how they got the project to 100%.
Well, I think that's kind of what we're trying to avoid, is that's an administrative burden to a small entity, right?
I think, it might be difficult to quantify volunteer hours. But if you put it at, I don't know, maybe, do we need to select a certain amount for that?
My suggestion would simply be to say, have it be like Mr. Graff suggested, that in that scoring, entities that reflect a more significant personal input, whether that's cash, materials, labor hours, score higher. And it's part of the scoring as opposed to a fixed criteria to apply. That would be my recommendation. Move it to something that gets you more points in the application process as opposed to a criteria, a barrier to entry.
We could do that. We could switch it to, you get bonus points if you match the funds that you receive, but not make it required. I mean, my fear is that somebody says, well, I want to buy 100 bike helmets for $1,000. They're like, well, if you only give me 9% of the money, I'm only buying 90 helmets. They'll never, you can't twist their arm to get those extra 10 helmets. So if we do it this way, fund up to 90%, they just gonna go to that level and stop. And so
There might be a threshold of the administrative burden. I think you should check with the account. It's like if it's like lower than $5,000 or $10,000, it might not be an issue.
It is, yeah. Do you mean at the HWA level or something for the?
For the reporting, for
tax code.
Oh,
yeah,
gotcha.
for the tax issue.
Do you guys need clearer direction from us or do you?
I think we're just gonna make infantry match bonus points with scoring.
Yeah, we can, on we can reword this, and then on the scoring sheet on page 3, we can pull the 10% match and put it into bonus to just show that in-kind contributions are part of their proposal.
I think, yeah, that works. We got our intent on that. I do want to thank you guys. We're trying to make it easier on them and I know it might be a little harder on you guys, but I think it's a really good program to be able to get these funds out to different organizations. And excuse my sieve of a brain, in the 18 months that I've been on this, is this the first year we're moving forward with the program or have we done it in the past?
Oh, this is the pilot year.
Excellent. Well, thank you for, if it doesn't work, we can tweak it next year, and require that match, but thank you for taking it on. Is it available to organizations just within the MPO boundaries or, in the greater borough area?
That's a great question.
I can think of like, Fox or Goldstream Lions or Esther Community Association, might want to get access to these sort of funds. I would love it to be borough-wide because I've got an interest in it, Ms. Little.
I think you could argue that with their role, Fast Planning's role as a regional planning organization as well as a metropolitan planning organization, that it could encompass the whole borough.
Right.
Yeah, the contributions just have to be consistent with our nonprofit mission.
And that's regional.
I want to go back and read it, but I don't think that there's a geographic boundary. So.
Can we put that in here clearly that you just in the Fairbanks North Star Borough area?
Yep.
Thank you. Excellent. Yes, Ms. Little. All right, Mayor Church.
I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for the effort. Thank you for the work. I know you guys have been working on this now for a couple of months and dialing it in. I really appreciate it. I think it's a great thing for our entire community to move good projects like this forward. So thank you.
Okay, one more small thing. The completion reports. How are we gonna track and manage this? I'm again thinking for $1,000, like what? If I'm pursuing a small grant, like what all am I committing myself to, and is it worth it? Trying to remove barriers.
Yeah, I mean, we can make that a form that we give them when they get the acceptance, it's the 1-page thing, like send us, 2 photographs of the event or the object or whatever, and then a description of what was accomplished, and then probably a section for feedback. Was this an easy process? What could we change to make it better? And that's it. And that's the 30-day one. And then the 1 year after completion, that could be a phone call, that could be a site visit. It could, in some places it won't be relevant. If it's people, kids getting helmets, it's gone. I think we could try to give them a leg up and just give them that, whatever that document looks like, and keep it super simple. And then that material can be used for your number 2, as this is feedback we got before we do the second round.
So I would just suggest that you stop with the 30 days after completion report, tracking people down a year later. A crew. Having worked on many rapid research response projects over the years, a year later, nobody remembers. So that's my last 2 cents, I promise.
I think when we talked about it in workshop that in the office, the intent with the 1 year follow-up is, especially if it's a piece of physical infrastructure that gets installed, like you learn a lot after something goes through a winter. So maybe we could put some caveat on that. They're like program dependent, a 1 year check-in might be a valuable exercise.
I think that's worthwhile. If it's a physical piece of infrastructure or something, we could say, we need to check back in 1 year. Hopefully that organization will be around in a year, or if it's Johnny on the spot, he just wants to do a thing.
And move on, right?
Yeah. And maybe we realize that we can't get hold of people in 1 year and we look back, but I think it's good to keep that for a physical piece of infrastructure versus like an event.
Yeah,
sure.
Wonderful.
I also wanted to be here and say thank you guys for bringing this up. Opportunities like this make a big impact in the small community.
Public comment?
Public comment. Do we have any public comment on this? Anybody online, want to weigh in on this new grant proposal? All right, seeing none. Anybody in the room? No, doesn't sound like it. We've had a fair bit of comment on the board, but any comment? No, with that, I think we're good. So, do we need an action item on this one?
Yeah.
Yes.
I move to approve the application materials and advertising grant program.
Second.
All right, motion made by Mr. Kraft, seconded by Mayor O'Neill. Thank you very much. With that, we are on to D, bridges and safety infrastructure for community success. Basics.
Yeah, vote.
Oh, I'm out of it today. I need the list of the things that I need to do each time. Okay, so vote, is there, since we're spending money, let's, make actual vote around the room.
Sure.
To include those
Yes.
amendments
Yeah.
as discussed.
I was gonna make.
I think that that would make sense.
Did
We
we make
don't
it?
have to bring back.
We didn't make a motion, we didn't make any amendments.
I'm just gonna clarify to approve the application materials as discussed.
Okay.
So that we capture that there were some requested changes, you know, they weren't line by line.
So we need to make that amendment to the motion. So we can have that carry the final,
Or amend the retro motion.
yeah,
Sure.
let's just have that carry the final motion. Did you get the amendment? So the amendment is to, by Ms. Little, to, amend the document as discussed by the board. Do I have a second? Second, by Mr. Krass. Let's go ahead and vote on that, and this vote will carry the main motion. You wanna run us through it?
Yes, Mr. Krass.
Yes.
Mayor Church.
Yes.
Ms. Little.
Yes.
Mayor Neal.
Yes.
Mayor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mr. Zarnicki.
Yes.
All right, 6-0, motion carries. Thank you very much, everybody. Looking forward to this. Okay. Now, we are on to D. Bridges, safety, infrastructure for community success, the Basics Act. We've got a letter of support to the congressional delegation. This will be an action item. Mr. Fox, can you carry us through this? And we're starting on page 201.
Yep, 201. So I'm going to share with you, before we get to the draft letter of support, a few slides from a webinar that the Association of MPOs put on earlier this month. If you go to page 102. So there's this LOT coalition of local officials in transportation. You can see all the logos there on that page though, but this LOT coalition includes the National Association of Development Organizations, National League of Cities, United States Conference on Mayors, National Association of Regional Councils, the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, and National Association of Counties. So these are a lot of nationwide organizations that serve cities, counties, metropolitan planning organizations, and regional transportation planning organizations across the US. They formed a coalition to begin producing some draft language to introduce to Congress as Congress is working on the next reauthorization bill, the next transportation bill. Next slide. Sorry. So where we're at here is currently we're working underneath it, the IIJA infrastructure package, which will expire on September 30th of 2026 of this year. And so Congress needs to either do a reauthorization or extension of that bill, or put together a new transportation bill for the next 4 to 5 years coming up. And the LOT Coalition sent some letters and worked with certain members in the US House to get a bipartisan bill drafted. That it has been named the Bridges and Safety Infrastructure for Community Success Act, the Basics Act. If you go to the next page. And so based on the request from the LOT Coalition, and I'm going to kind of highlight some of the things that are included in the Basics Act that directly benefit MPOs, but we also had an opportunity to provide input on the next transportation bill when the US Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, put out a request for information last fall, to which we put together a letter to their office on what our priorities would be for the next transportation bill. And it was really interesting to see that the LOT Coalition, there was quite a bit of overlap in their request alongside our request, and a lot of things that we asked for have made it into this first bipartisan transportation bill that we hope goes to the House here at some point this spring or summer. But what it does, real briefly, that benefits us is it does increase the amount of planning funds that are available to metropolitan planning organizations across the US. Currently, in the current transportation bill, it's only 1% of the total funding amount. Translation to our office here, we get about $600,000 a year, but by increasing it up to 2.5, we would be just over $1.2 million in planning funds to operate our office. And so, of course, we don't need that much money to operate this organization. However, we can use the balance of those funds for our long-range transportation plan updates or an update to our non-motorized transportation plan, or some of these other supplemental plans. Currently, for our required documents, as well as any supplemental planning efforts, we're using project funding to cover the cost of those, so our surface transportation program dollars. But this would increase the amount of planning funds to us such that we wouldn't have to use project dollars to do planning efforts in the future. It also eliminates the match requirement, so we wouldn't have to pay 9% match those federal funds. It would be 100% federal share. And then for some of the fund categories, it would increase the allocation of surface transportation program dollars to MPOs across the country. And then for highway safety improvement program dollars and bridge formula funds, there would be a 25% sub-allocation of the funds in that bill that would be split out by population category. So some would be split out to 0 to 5,000, 5 to 50,000, 50,000, 200,000, and over 200,000. So we would actually get an allocation of highway safety improvement program dollars, something that we haven't had before. Those are currently 100% in control of the state. We would also get a sub-allocation of bridge funding, and the bridge funding would be converted to strictly a formula program. So it would be distributed across to the states by formula, by population, and then 25% of the money that the state of Alaska receives, it would be further sub-allocated to those population categories. So we would actually have some bridge funds that we could utilize in our TIP for any local bridge projects that we wish to assign that funding to. And then the bullets on the right-hand side there, it reaffirms MPO project selection in our MTP and TIP development processes. It strengthens the consultation requirements with areas below 50,000 population. So if the state has a project in an area, like say for Juneau, they would formally have to consult with the city and borough of Juneau for those projects to advance. It would provide access as an MPO to the federal financial management system so that we can see the obligations occurring live with the funding that we program. And then this one here, sub-allocated funds protected from transfer. So specifically to the highway safety improvement program, before the state transfers any of that money to some other federal funding category that might be more flexible, that remaining 75% of the funds that are not sub-allocated, the state would have to run a competitive grant program before transferring those funds so that any city, borough in the state had the ability to apply for those funds before they could transfer them. And then another really important one here, funding for regional transportation planning organizations. We're a pilot regional planning organization, but we have no funding to do the transportation planning work beyond our boundary for the whole borough. That is our hope. Through this bill, it would offer up a minimum of $300,000 per year to regional transportation planning organizations. So we could access an additional $300,000 to hire a full-time rural transportation planner and develop a long-range transportation plan for the entire borough outside of the urbanized area. So huge opportunity for us there. Page 205, where a lot of this is coming from and what the push is from the LOC Coalition is the recognition that the current and past transportation bills are out of balance. So the majority of the funding ends up going to state DOTs, 84% of it, and local governments are only receiving the 16% share. When local governments own 43% of the highway system, road miles, and 75% of all US road miles, local governments also own half of the public bridges in the US. So this provides a more equitable distribution for local governments. It's very much focused on the benefits to local governments. Page 206, this shows you the proposed funding amounts in this transportation bill reauthorization. So the big takeaway here is that this new bill isn't reducing funds in any category. It's either keeping them the same year to year or providing some increases. Where you see some kind of big increases in funding, like for surface transportation program and the highway safety improvement program, bridge formula program, is that basically they're taking funding that used to be dedicated to US DOT discretionary grants and turning it into formula funding. So you don't have to compete for the money, you'll just get it by formula based on population. So that's where you see some of these increases. So overall, yes, it is in certain categories, again, the funding is kept consistent. from the current transportation bill, and in some categories, the amount is actually going up. So I don't see anything necessarily here that we would lose out from. So my letter of support, beginning on page 207. Again, this is a letter to congressional delegation. If this bill is introduced, it would first go through the U.S. House of Representatives and then move on to the Senate. It's possible the Senate may produce a competing bill and then they meet in the middle, or one gets thrown out and one advances. But I wanted to send it to all three members of our congressional delegation for their awareness that as this cycles through committees, to pay attention to it and let them know what we support and what we would like to have added in addition that's not currently included in the bill. So this letter highlights on the bottom of this page here, the bullets there are previous comments that Fast Planning, this board has provided to US DOT Secretary of Transportation based on his request for information last fall. So, strengthening access to safety funding, guaranteeing bridge funding availability to local governments, maintaining current or increased funding levels in the bill, just as I just showed you there, eliminating the match requirement for planning funds, increasing the overall amount of planning funds that are available to NPOs. And then on the next page, establishing a dedicated funding for regional transportation planning organizations. And then, if we go to the next page, top of 208. And this was a comment from the technical committee on March 4th. These next four bullets there, these are things that we had requested when we responded to that request for information to US DOT. These are things that did not show up in the bill. So extending the required cycle for our long-range transportation plan updates from every 4 years to every 10 years, allowing year-to-year carry forward of federal funds, expanding and updating the exemption criteria for exempt projects for air quality conformity, and maintaining the 9.03% special match rate for Alaska. So the technical committee wanted us to highlight for our congressional delegation, hey, these are things that we asked for, they didn't make it into the bill. So as it moves through committees, please consider trying to speak to asking to put these in the bill, because they didn't make it into the first draft. I do intend, so pages 209 through 212, I do intend to include a copy of our letter from last fall that we turned into US DOT, so that if members of the congressional delegation or their staff want to dive into exactly what we mean by those bullets on the letter that we hope to send here, they can dive into more specifics on what we were asking for and why we were asking for it. And then last, I want to highlight for you some of the documents from the LOT Coalition, and then some of the documents from AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Transportation Officials, which are not necessarily in favor of this bill. So because they're in favor of state interests, whereas the LOT Coalition is in favor of local government interests. So pages 213 to 214 is their section by section summary of the act. Page 215 to 217 is the request letter from the LOT Coalition for the Basics Act to be drafted as the next surface transportation reauthorization bill. But then, so pages 218 to 222 is a more recent letter that came out actually on the day of your LOT Policy Board meeting from the LOT Coalition to the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, in response to comments that they posted on their website. So before we get into that, I just want to highlight those comments beginning on page 223. So the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials are basically objecting to this idea that changing the current split of 85% of these funds going to states and 15% to locals is now being pushed to a 75% to the state and 25% to locals. They also highlight that state roads or highways carry 70% of the nation's vehicle miles traveled. So they're not using road miles, they're using vehicle miles traveled, and nearly 90% of the country's bridge traffic. So they're using traffic numbers as opposed to hard infrastructure numbers. So you can look at this different ways as to what's more important for this funding. But basically, they think that the investment should stay heavy on the state side They also object to increase in MPO and local control over planning, programming, and fund administration. So, and then the rebuttal letter to those comments, if you go back to page 218, is from ASHTO. That they just kind of outright state that ASHTO's recent statements seem to interpret the legislation structure, intent, and fiscal impact correctly. And then they have a fact sheet beginning on page 220 of the packet, addressing their comments and debunking some of the things that were said. So there's clearly some debate between the Lot Coalition and ASHTO. And I just want to highlight that all for you in fairness, that there is more than one side to this issue with this Basics Act. But bottom line is that if the Basics Act was passed, it would be of great benefit to our MPO and to our local governments. So up to you on how you'd like to discuss this.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Fox? I'm sure we will. Mr. Kress.
Yeah, the sub-allocated funds protected from transfer. So is that the August redistribution? Is that could you talk more about how that works functionally?
Well, there's many fund categories that DOT has access to through the transportation bill that some of them, like up to 50% of the funds, can be transferred out of that fund category and converted to another fund category. So like CMAQ funds, congestion mitigation air quality funds, some of those can be transferred and converted to surface transportation program dollars so that those funds become more flexible for their use. So so that's what it refers to.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, that's useful. There's a lot of different piles of money. So
Yeah, a lot of dynamics here.
yeah, few.
Ms. Little.
Yeah, and that's fundamentally the state DOT's objection to the Basics Act. Like, there's fabulous things in here, 100% federal share planning funding, increase in planning funding, the dedicated funding for the RPOs, lots of really positive things, but the addition of essentially more sub-allocations is untenable. You know, the reason we have struggled historically in August redistribution is that IIJA created 1 billion new pots of funding and slice and dice this money and put all these restrictions now. So it's not, I can have a great carbon reduction program project, but now I have to find one that fits 50 to 200,000 population. I have to find one that fits 200,000 population. I have to find one that fits under 5,000 population. Even, you know, you allocate bridge funding to an MPO, bridges are expensive. It doesn't guarantee that you're gonna have enough money for even one bridge. So now we're trying to, the way that state DOTs approached the reauthorization was two main fronts. And this is in the ASHTO correspondence. One is increase the funding, right? Inflation ate our lunch. We need to see just to maintain current infrastructure investment levels, we need a dollar increase to provide the same level of service. And two, give us maximum flexibility. MAP 21 did a fabulous job of eliminating, Safety Lou had a bunch of little pots of money, you know, trails and transportation enhancements and now you're trying to fit little pieces of this bigger puzzle together. MAP 21 said, nope. We're gonna simplify, we're gonna have a focus on the NHS, right? Because as a federal investment, that is the network that connects, drives the economy. And we're gonna make states accountable for asset management principles. So we got performance metrics on deficient bridge areas, pavement condition. And we were asked to follow an asset management strategy of managing our infrastructure. And then IIJA comes along and goes and throws carbon reduction, protect, and creates all these pots of money and throws us back into trying to fit projects into buckets instead of saying, this is the infrastructure we have, this is the needs we have, this is how we're gonna make those investments. Even increasing HSIP, we can make meaningful safety improvements that don't need highway safety improvement program. Your highway safety improvement program is very, very rigid in its eligibility. You have to meet a cost benefit ratio. And so again, you know, these are things that sound really good on paper, but fundamentally make it very challenging for us to actually make the investments that the public, that the infrastructure needs. Another important thing to remember is Alaska is very, very different. these other local communities, that are asking for increased investment in their infrastructure, they aren't allowed to use federal highway dollars on the same classes of roads we are. We can use federal highway dollars on local roads. Other states are not allowed to do that. It's a very Alaska specific exemption. Other states, the MPOs are actually administering projects, so they have, engineering teams, consultants that they hire, they do the full process as opposed to our state, where the state of Alaska does all of that work, all of that, responsibility to the Federal Highway Administration for, stewardship and oversight falls to the state. So those are some key differences too, that you kind of have to put that lens on, when you read these things. The issue in Minneapolis for wanting more local investments is very different than here in Alaska, where we are making those investments in the local infrastructure. I mean, we're working together on getting Dochi Bridge replaced, right? We've got money, we're happy to spend it there, that's a great use. The Old Cease reconstruction, the state is opting to fund that, out of our allocations for this community. This fundamentally makes those things harder. Is the state's perspective. Speech over.
Any other questions, on the staff report, questions?
Just real quick, going back to page 205 and the graph, I appreciate the graph from AMPO. Do we have a more statewide based numbers to fit into this graph versus national numbers? Or an
I don't
estimate?
I don't have this for the state of Alaska.
Okay.
That's something we could potentially generate through GIS.
Yeah.
But, that takes some time. I don't know that that's actually. I don't know, maybe it has been looked at before by DOT. State roads versus local roads versus orphan roads, like on a statewide basis, but I feel like it's a GIS exercise to pull those numbers.
Okay, I just didn't know. I wanted to ask, so thank you very much.
As comparable with our federal one here too.
Are any other MPOs debating a similar letter? That you know of?
Many hundreds across the country.
I mean, sorry, in Alaska, AMAS or MVP.
I don't know if they have letters of support on their agenda,
Okay.
so,
I did not see one for AMASs.
Any other questions? All right, with that, we'll move to public comment. Is there any public comment online from anybody online who would like to make a comment about this letter of support? Not seeing anybody come off mute. Do we have anybody in the room who would like to make a comment one way or the other or about it? All right, not seeing anybody in the room standing up. We're gonna go ahead and close public comment. Do we have a motion so that we can discuss it amongst ourselves? Mr. Kraft.
I move that we authorize Jackson to sign and send the letter of support.
Second, motion made by Mr. Kraft, seconded by Ms. O'Neill. Now we can discuss amongst ourselves. Do we have any, who would like to start? Anybody? Mr. Kraft?
Sure, I guess it's my motion. I think that anytime, we can support local control and local planning efforts, it's incumbent on us to do so. This would also lower the burden for local municipalities of paying for a lot of these activities. It would increase the amount of federal funding that would come into this MPO and so lower the burden on our local taxpayers. I feel like there's a lot of room as this is moving along and developing, but I think conceptually, I support large swaths of this. I know that state departments of transportation, and this is going to come up in a few of our other agenda items. I know that they're focused on the mission and implementation. And sometimes, the folks that live in those areas want you to slow down and talk about it. And I feel that our role, as local municipal leaders is to encourage that conversation and ensure that we have as much input locally as possible in how federal transportation dollars are spent in our area. And so I would support this and recommend that we sign the letter.
Anybody else? I will, echo those sentiments. If we're gonna be seeing an expanded boundary, we're gonna be seeing the ability to get more, local dollars and local control spent on some of the road service areas within the borough, which is an important aspect in my book also. Those roads are gonna need support, and as we work to try to get more service to some of those service areas, which is something our assembly is talking about, that will also be a good opportunity to work very locally at this level. Look back at the discussion between road miles and lane miles. And the push and pull between northern region and the Anchorage area for sure. And that's something we always struggle with with the interior delegation. And something we still, that I err on the side of road miles. Because that's what we're dealing with here, and looking at locally, that's certainly a big impact as well. So I'm gonna support the motion as well. Do you have any other comments?
Question for staff, do you have any, concerns of, or any anticipation of any, issues working with the state if this would pass?
No, I don't have any concerns. I mean, these are all, with the exception of the bridge formula funds and the highway safety improvement program funds, we would have control over programming those dollars of the projects that you all select here, at the table in our TIP document. So, it just expands our ability to fund more in different types of projects than we have in the past. But so it adds a little bit more work to our plate, but again, it gives our local governments direct paths, direct avenues to access fund categories that you all have not been able to access in the past.
Thank you.
And, I guess to follow up on the idea of, how Alaska is unique in this situation, this MPO is unique in that we have state agencies that are voting members on our board. And so you are engaged at the most actual, I get to say how these funds move. And so I think some of the concerns of this sort of separation of concerns of implementation, I think you're very engaged in the planning piece here at the MPO as well. And so I hope that you understand that we're welcoming that input and determining how we can affect change locally with the help of the State Department of Transportation.
Ms. Little?
So I just want to clarify, the state perspective, the actual perspective on this isn't that we don't necessarily support local investment. It's that by putting strings on, you're dividing the money into specific buckets. So if you don't exactly meet that, this is August redistribution in a nutshell. You don't meet every penny of that chunk. And now there's 20 chunks instead of 5 chunks. Now you've hurt yourself in the August redistribution conversation. We're at risk of lapsing funds in the AMATS boundary because of challenges in being able to get those projects moving forward. And suffer from a lot of locally driven scope changes on projects that have been on the books for a long time. And that will come up in some of the business items where some of the conversation is being driven there. So that's where, from the state's perspective, we're happy to work with locals and we want to make the investment where the investment is needed. But putting regulatory strings on these things just hurts us all and makes it that much harder for us to get a project across the finish line, as opposed to working together on less restrictive pots of money. So if we want to put more money into SCBG Flex, by all means, right? I can use that money anywhere, any type of road, service area, any street. I can use it on a bridge. I can use it, the more money we have in SCBG Flex, the better off I feel like for us as a state we are. We can make those investments wherever they're needed. Where if it's SCBG 50 to 200,000, I have a very narrow place I can make those investments. So that's we want maximum flexibility for the funding so that we can make our programming decisions holistically and not be in the situation of trying to fit things into things so that we're competitive for office redistribution and we don't lapse. That's just our, I mean, you hear create a competitive grant program. And it's just like as a state administrative burden of that. And getting all of that stuff done in time to meet fiscal year obligations, it just doesn't, none of these things fit the real life cycle of a project. That's what we keep running up against. Projects to be delivered in 24 months, you know, it's not as big a deal. Projects take years and multiple funding bills and multiple policy boards, and that's where the more flexibility you have regulatorily, and we're working things out as individuals as opposed to federal requirements. That's from my experience and perspective where we feel successful.
Yeah, and I suppose that there's some concern of mine that what you see happen is dedicated funds that are looking to support, you know, multimodal transport and users that are basically users that are not in cars. And you'll find that those funds lapse, projects aren't put together, they're too difficult, they sit on the shelf forever, and then they go to support motorized users. And it's interesting, I think this is a nationwide issue where you see that, you know, the state DOTs count cars. And that's how they define success, and that's how they define use is motorized users. And I think it's something that comes up a lot locally where we look at people who are multimodal users and we think we want those dedicated funds to be used directed towards those users and make sure those funds stick with them. And if that's just a lack of imagination on project identification, but that said, I understand the desire for flexibility, you know, the DOTs in the game of execution. Is there an amendment that we would like to offer that like highlights the concern for funds being trapped, sub-allocated funds being trapped? I don't think the entire piece is contingent on that. You know, the whole Basics Act. And these groups have highlighted as an ongoing negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, as a state, we're gonna oppose a change in allocation, right? Any change in allocation. And I think it's important to note the Alaska units, right? We are able to fund on both of those. We do it routinely, and that is not the case in any other state, maybe for as well. So like I said, there are components of the Basics Act and DOT has put a policy paper together on this that I can check if I can share with them. I suspect that I could share with this group. Obviously, we support the 100% federal share, planning funds, increase in planning funds, funding for RPOs, you know, those things, but that fundamental creation of new sub-allocations and eliminating flexibility for us to maximize our transfers from more restrictive funding sources to our flexible SDBG pot are things that make it harder for us to deliver infrastructure in the state.
You know, one of the things you said is why I definitely want to support this. I do support a reallocation to make sure that MPOs have more of that control, our ability to track smaller projects. Ones in the North Pole area, you know, a lot of the discussion we have here about, I don't want to call them the fun things, but the small things that can have a big impact on the communities. Usableness for its residents, multimodal, but also small roads, you know, parking, transportation, of all kinds, I think is really important. And our ability to move that around here locally, and if we can get more of those funds to be done here with our, you know, the 7 of us. That's something I strongly support, and I think can make a bigger impact on this community. Than just about any other way we can spend those dollars. So I'm excited to spend this and to write this letter and see how this bill, which has a long way to go, can come out on the other end. Any other comments? All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and vote on the motion to have fast planning and Mr. Fox draft the letter of support and move it up to the congressional delegation. Go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Trask,
Yes.
Mayor Church,
Yes.
Ms. Little,
No,
Mayor O'Neill.
Yeah.
Mayor Hopkins,
Yes.
Mr. Zarnecki,
No.
All right, with that, it passes 4-2. And thank you very much for that, and that good discussion to understand what we're looking at. With that, we are moving on to item E amongst new business, Metropolitan Transportation Plan Schedule Update and Base Project List. We've
So
been
we've
going
got-
just about 2 hours. Do we want to take a quick break for a minute? I have to.
What can we discuss as a board if we want to go past time or, I mean, the rest of the agenda here is not time critical. I can present this update next month. There's other things that are involved in business that I believe we need to or want to be discussed here today. I mean, my most important one is getting this tip amendment number 2, air quality conformity determination motion made today. That's my most important on that list. So I know Nick Zartnecki has a hard stop at 2:20. I don't know about others. If you guys want to go to 2:33, we are available. But what's the will of the board to have a meeting?
I'm available. When the packet broke, my internet connection. I cleared my afternoon.
I don't have anything until 3:30. I can continue to go.
In agreement.
Okay, do we want to move back to old business to make sure we're, there's no action item on what we're on right now under.
Or obligations not,
New
we
business.
can take that up next one.
I feel like 7A and B are not gonna be extremely time intensive, so I'm fine if we just keep them along personally.
Okay. That sounds good. Let's go ahead and stick with, eight
Need a
E.
motion to extend
So moved. Second and
to,
Motion by Ms. Little until the end of the agenda, or do you want to do 3 o'clock?
let's call it 2:30 and see how successful we are.
All right, until 2:30. You can take that as your second still.
That
All right.
falls here, guys.
Motion by Ms. Little for extended to 2:30, seconded by Mayor Church. No objection? No objection. 2:30 it is. I am gonna take a break after we're done with E though. Just a quick one. All right, let's go ahead and number 8E, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Schedule Update and Base Project List. Mr. Fox, take it away. We are on page 226.
Yeah, so beginning on page 226 is a memo from our consultant team working on our travel demand model update. And basically, they've raised the flag that they have concerns about meeting the schedule to update our travel demand model fully for our long range transportation plan by the end of this year to support the long range transportation plan update. So in the outline, the reasons, why there's delays on their side, first and foremost, there was a delay in contracting when this contract was set up with RSG between the state and RSG. It's not really anybody's fault. It's just is what it is, and these things do happen. But also back when this was set up, there was a government shutdown that led to delay in getting data for employment inputs. We also, as we started working through this contract, one of the things we had RSG do was look at the different softwares and vendors for travel demand modeling work. Currently, we use Transcad, and through that process, we decided to switch softwares from Transcad to Vizoom. And then on the next page, our travel demand model, the one we're currently using, is from 2013. And it doesn't utilize the latest and greatest advancements in travel demand modeling. So not only are we migrating from one platform to another, but there are additional features and other data inputs that are required. So this memo, I did share this with our federal partners to let them know that we would be behind schedule. And I do know for MPOs across the country, sometimes you're given the grace to do what's called an interim plan update. So a plan update light, and then finish up the full plan update the following year if you miss your deadline. So that is our plan of attack, is to do a long range transportation plan update light without the full travel demand model completed in 2026. And then when this contract catches up in 2027, we'll bring back for a more robust update to our long range transportation plan. We did get a green light from our federal partners that that is acceptable for us to proceed on that. There's a schedule on page 228 that kind of outlines those two parallel but separate efforts there for the interim long range transportation plan and then the more robust final transportation plan. And I just want to note that in Alaska, all three MPOs are in the same scheduled block. So there will be an interim long range plan update for Anchorage as well as Matsu. They will not get to a full long range transportation plan update by December 26th. So all three of us are doing interim updates because all three of us have issues with our current contracts meeting this schedule for a variety of reasons, including some of those that are stated. But I guess beyond that schedule update, what I wanted to share with you is beginning on page 230. I did put together a very long spreadsheet of every project in our boundary that is included in an approved or adopted plan. These are from plans that are adopted by this policy board, by the borough, by the city. So you see our long range transportation plan, our non-motorized plan, our safe routes to school plans, the highway safety improvement program, the city's ADA transition plan, et cetera. But this is what I consider the base project list for this next long range transportation plan. So this is what we have on the books right now. The range, when you look at short, medium, long range, et cetera, for these projects is, that's all subject to debate and reprioritization. But this list is something that as we go through our long range transportation plan, we'll be working with to identify some new projects to be added, but no projects that need to be modeled for air quality conformity. So simpler projects, not projects that are, introducing additional lane capacity or putting in new roads where roads don't currently exist, et cetera. So I do anticipate this list to grow with, ideas from our consultant team and our steering committee as we look at pavement condition data, as we look at bridge condition data, as we look at our crash data to identify, new intersections for safety improvements, et cetera. So it'll be added on to this, but this is a base list of what we're working with of projects that, and this does exclude projects that have been constructed and ones that will go to construction in 2026. So this is 2027 forward. And then two new projects that have never been in our adopted plans before would be the Steese Highway Milepost 5 bridge replacement at June Hot Springs. That is on this list, as well as the Chena Flood Control Bridge project. So those are two projects that have never been planned through fast planning and are not in current approved plans, but I did add them to the list because we know one's actively going to construction this summer and one is actively in design. So, but it'll be up to this board to support those staying in our long range transportation plan moving forward. So anyways, it's a list to look at. Let me know if there's any discrepancies or if it's a city street or that you disagree with that project, let me know. We'll have that, all those comments noted for the record, but this is the list our steering committee is working with currently.
Any questions on that for Mr. Fox? As we look at a time frame for when we would want to change some of these, one that Mayor Church talked about, that's a big one, huge project and a big community impact, would be the Fairbanks North Pole Rail realignment.
Yep.
Moving us south of town, obviously, are we able to say we'd like to start trying to plan for that in the medium term or something like that instead of the long term? And that would be one of the changes we'd be able to make at this board?
Yeah, through this spring and summer, you'll start seeing documents, the chapters that build this long range transportation plan, and that's the time to discuss those things. And despite how we prioritize them based on our evaluation criteria, the board can reprioritize how you see fit. Like if you see something in the long range, no, we really want to get that done in the next 5 years, let's put it in the short range. You have the ability to amend the list to reflect your priorities.
I would request, when we get a more final version of this plan before we're, finalizing it, but able to edit it, if we could span that over 2 months. There are 2 meetings, I guess, it would be 1 month. But 2 meetings where we have an opportunity to go through these projects, look at them amongst each other with the staff, and then come back at the next meeting, and say that how we'd like to change it. So we don't have to come up with our ideas, with one shot, might be a good idea. So I'd like to, structure it that way when we're looking down the line. Correct. There's a little.
And just Jackson, functionally, this list will be vetted through technical committee.
Yep.
And then it goes policy and.
Then it goes out for public review for input and comes back and policy board makes the final decision on the list. But yes, it will get run through all those cycles. It'll get run through our RAC committee or tech committees, other committees as well. So we want to share it far and wide and get all the input that we can, but this body is the final decision making body on that final list.
Yeah, I did provide, Randy with a list of additional projects or clarify that too. So
Great. Yeah, we'd love to have that.
that'll come through technical, I assume, or for the working group, most likely, actually.
Yep.
In that case.
Perfect. Thank you.
Whatever time for, or spot in that process of the rack and the technical committee and everything, and if we are having our first review of it, doesn't matter, but that 2 phase would be great.
Hey Greg.
Yeah.
It might be something to consider to do that at one of the work sessions, that the pre-policy, meeting that's set up. So we can use that time as a review time and then save this time for when we're actually.
That could work as opposed to a 4-hour meeting.
Yeah.
Sure. I like that. Mayor O'Neill had a better idea than me. Let's see what she said.
Today.
Yeah. You can quote me on it. Won't be the last time I say it. All right, with that, we're gonna roll back up the calendar to old business.
You wanna do a break?
I do, but I wanna take a quick break, so let's come back in, somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes, we'll make it 5 minutes.
Okay.
So 5.
Yeah.
Oh.
Do some jumping jacks.
Start finding thing out.
Like, can we do it?
We're trying to do the whole data. So I'm looking like.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, we did old business, or new business first, and so. Yeah, and there's.
Have you heard of it?
We haven't done so, yeah.
What?
It's called Abundance by Ezra Klein.
I don't read serious things. I only read poem books.
It's such a good one.
Got a lot of-
There's a whole like it talks about like how things get gummed up and like slowed down, and it talks a lot about like how the government money moves so slow. It speaks a lot to like
I
how
lived that.
bureaucracy, yeah.
That life, so I try not to read those things, just outside when
It's
they
such a
came.
clear story, so it's, you know, yeah. But, you know, it gives you the history of like the Clean Water Act and how they tried to do something good and it's been like totally adapted, modified, mutilated into something that can still high-speed rail and.
Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act and these, like, the problem isn't the laws, right? It's people in it. On the federal highway side, the problem actually is the laws. Like,
Yeah.
they really did kind of box themselves into a corner on some stuff that,
Yeah.
you know, is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Sometimes, a lot of these, and we find ways around it.
Yeah.
Want something?
Exactly. Oh, man, I know.
So.
One more.
Okay, it's unmuted.
All right, so thanks, everybody. Welcome back. We are gonna go ahead and pick up on old business 7A. Metropolitan Planning Organization Authorities. We're on page 23 of our packet. We'll review this and have ourselves a discussion. So, Mr. Fox, you wanna take it away on page 23?
Yeah, and I'll be kind of brief on this. Just want to make note that this was added to the agenda at the request of Mr. Kraft. But we did receive a letter last month, is a joint letter, from the the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration on, in response to the many discussions that we've been having at Fast Planning and at AMATS about MPO authorities and our ability to add or remove any project that this board wishes to our transportation improvement program, to our TIP. And these federal agencies had promised that this letter would come out at some point in time. They did work closely with their respective agencies headquarters back in DC. And so we have basically their legal opinion, which expands on the current regulations as we understand them. And so this letter from February 13, pages 23 through 27, provides that clarity for us as staff and for you all. This helps clear up any confusion there may have been with the MPO authority letter sent to us by the Commissioner's Office to Fast Planning as well as AMATS. I'll note that beginning on page 28, the Commissioner's Office State Attorney's Office did send a response letter to this, objecting to the statements that were included in the letter from our federal partners. And then behind that, beginning on page 33, is the municipality of Anchorage's attorney's legal opinion on those, the MPO authority letter that Anchorage received, which is ours, is very similar. So there's correspondence flying back and forth. I did hear from our federal partners there will be another letter from Federal Highways and Federal Transit Administration in DC back to DOT based on the letter that they just sent out on March 5th. But at this time, we are to rely on the February 13th letter from the Federal Highway Administration, which is the beginning of the section of this packet. And the statements in this are consistent with my understanding and use of the regulations. I don't know if Mr. Paskey, you want to add anything since you wanted this added to the agenda?
Yeah, and I guess just for background, we had discussed, some potential changes to our bylaws. They were tied to the expansion of the MPA. And so I was really, the policy board, we considered, taking on legal counsel. Then Chair Cleworth, I think if I paraphrase what he said, it was hiring the lawyers just you're paying for an opinion. We all come with our own opinions. I think it was roughly what he said. And so the policy board elected not to go out and seek legal counsel. So it was interesting when I saw the October 7th letter from the municipality of Anchorage, their municipal attorney, outlining a lot of the issues that are very similar, boundary issues, a large project at the edge of their boundary. So it's a very relatable issue for some of the things that have come forth this body. And so I was excited to see that. And then the letter from the U.S. Department of Transportation, the February 13th letter, there were just really some salient points that I thought were important for us to understand what the funding agency and, this is the body that ensures we comply with federal law. And so the lion's share of transportation projects are through this office. And so what I feel that it's incumbent on us to understand their position as we move forward, especially when there's a request for changes for us to acknowledge changes to the authority that may not align with this. So state DOTs do not have authority over which projects. Oh, he's keeping us safe, the mailman.
I just don't want to lose dog privileges in here.
It's kind of cliche. So state DOTs do not have authority over which projects an MPO decides to include in the tip. Okay, that's clear. Because the statute clearly specifies that MPOs are to develop the tips, this means that the decision-making authority to determine which projects are ultimately included in a tip remains with the MPO. And then the statute directs the state to select for implementation national highway projects from an already approved tip in cooperation with an MPO. So they continue to outline that our responsibility here in the tip is really that first inclusion into the planning phase is our responsibility. And it should be the first step. On page 25, page 3 of this letter, MPOs have legal authority to exclude from the tip regionally significant NHS projects proposed by the state. So we move down towards the third paragraph there. An MPO is not required to include in the tip projects the state determines are regionally significant simply because those projects may fall within MPO's MPA. So I feel that the body that is responsible for the lion's share of funding in the state of Alaska has made clear that our authority here is for inclusion in the plan, and that we are the group who determines what goes into the tip. And this doesn't take away from the state's responsibility to implement that plan, and it's required to include it by reference. And the only, when we move into the response from the state of Alaska, in the second page here, the thing that most stood out in here, the directive in 23 U.S. Code 134J3 that all projects proposed for funding under Chapter 1 be included in the tip. So if that's true, our approval becomes meaningless. It would require us to include everything that the state approves. And it completely would eliminate local control. We become an advisory body, which is not the intent of the law, of federal law. And so I think it's important as these conversations continue on, that we understand the position that the state is taking is that we should be an advisory body without authority or local control. And I'm not saying that to be combative, but that is the position that they're taking. And so I feel that it's incumbent on us to be clear-eyed about that. That's why I wanted to make sure this came before us.
Any other comments? Ms. Little?
So I just want to be really clear on a couple of things, and this is not anything that I haven't said prior. The audit coming back on, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for a year now. But the law grants tip approval authority to two entities. Policy board approves the tip, the governor approves the tip. The governor has the final say. The state has final say. Further, in 23 CFR 450, it says the state selects the projects from the approved tip. So the state is ultimately responsible for selecting which projects from the tip advance through project development. Those are important things. Those are not things that we have a lot of conflict with fast planning on. So just want to be clear on that. And at the end of the day, I think I said it yesterday, to some extent, to me, this is noise. I've said this all along. We can debate authorities till we're blue in the face. That's not how we get things done for our community and our state. We get things done by working together towards common goals. We're going to have disagreements on project priorities. But I feel confident that this body can work through those and ensure that the state is meeting their obligations while also, meeting the local needs and ensuring that we've got a robust local program with a fast tip.
I agree. We can work through our differences. We can find those things, continue to find the success that we can. A lot of these are left over from when we were in it with your predecessor at the table, in the Department of Law about what these exact things were and how we address our operating bylaws, how we come up with conflict resolution and what the changes were proposed to the bylaws that were in, you know, pretty stark contrast to what the CFRs and the code said, based on the conversations with, federal highways at this table. So, you know, I think we have been able to move past it here by putting the bylaws off to the side, and those changes that were recommended back then. When we, changed chairs at this, this board, there was a discussion that, you know, we would be starting over. And so if we're gonna bring those bylaws back up, which I think might be a discussion, on the next one, on B, just in terms of the border, the boundary policy, the boundary sign, agreement, and, where it sits as a possible, readdressing of the bylaw changes, and bringing that back up, which was not tied, for the record, to each other. It wasn't this and this, but it was, let's make sure we are able to work together, and we're seeing that cooperation on the table. It does go back to this. So, you know, AMATS is still dealing with this. What ends up happening there is gonna have statewide impact too. So I agree, we are able to move past it. We might have some differences coming up. I don't think we'll have those in the next 9 months. But what happens after that, we might still have to continue these discussions. But, you know, I guess it's a little more than noise, but it's, because I think these are important discussions that we need to have, because AMAS is gonna be dealing with it, and if something is decided one way or the other, it'll be important, for us up here and for MVP as well. So, one question I would like to ask you, Mr. Fox, you know, in terms of a cooperative process, that's always worked, well, that's almost always worked well in the past. But how do we see that going forward, on making sure that, you know, our tip that we put forward is the moves forward throughout the process? If we don't come to an agreement on a project and we want something, into the tip, and the state says they don't want that in the tip, what does that cooperation look like when we get to that stage?
Well, let's use an example here, the East Highway Post 5 bridge replacement at, Channel Springs Road. Okay, so this is a project that wasn't included in our long range plan or in our tip document, okay, because it was never a project that was ever planned out or ever identified as a priority by the Sentinel board. You all have the opportunity to consider adding that into our long range plan and our tip during this cycle, during this year. I do believe it's a good project. I do believe that it serves many freight operators, not just one. I do think that this board should consider adding it into your local plans. We didn't include it for a variety of reasons. You know, a couple of years ago, with the controversy of the ore haul, or talking about the chain of flood control bridges and a lot of other things that were happening. So when controversy like that comes up, this board has a decision whether to include or remove a project or whatnot. But I think in a spirit of cooperation, that would be a good project for this board to make a good faith effort to support it, advance it. I think it's a very good project for our community. But it does need to go through our process, and it needs to have public input. It needs to, the technical committee needs to discuss its merits, and the policy board needs to discuss its merits. And so that, to me, an open conversation, not planning things behind the scene, you know, closed doors or whatever. Why that never got onto our radar, I'm not really sure, but we have an opportunity now to include it, and that's good cooperation. If we have good communication and everybody has the opportunity to discuss it and decide to support it. So.
Thanks for that, Tim.
The last thing I'll say is that, you know, Anchorage had a similar situation back in the early 2010s. So that's what you call it now. The Connect Arm Crossing, where they removed that from their MTP and to advance. So sometimes there's projects that the board may not want to advance, and there might be political reasons or otherwise, or fiscal constraint reasons why you not want to include them in your tip. So I'm not saying in the future we're not going to ever be there again, but if everybody's working with each other, a reasonable table, we should be able to find some give and take and support each other.
I just want to clarify, Mayor Hopkins, in your scenario, you were saying the policy board puts a project in the tip the state doesn't want. In that situation, the state has the authority to simply not start the project. That's the authority, right?
Mhm.
The cooperative piece is we work together to figure out how we can make that project work, right? I can't honestly think of a scenario in Fairbanks where fast would pick something state couldn't do. Because if you wanted to turn the Mitchell into a bike path, we'd have some conflict there, right? So.
I could probably come up with an idea or two, but there would be one that
I
might be
just heard challenge
logical.
accepted.
Yeah, understood. You know, it is both ways though. That cooperation does work both ways. So while I made that as an example, it was certainly both ways. And I know we've been dealing with the state not agreeing with us on boundary changes. It, you know, it's not far-fetched. Mr. Kraft?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's clear in my understanding as well, that the DOT is responsible for the implementation of the plan, but inclusion of the plan, that's the sticking point here, where the state is saying that they can develop things and they will then appear in the tip, and we are required to include them. And that argument is where things are, I think, it moves it out of local control. And it's becomes untenable for me. It's doesn't reflect what's in federal law. And I agree with the spirit of cooperation. I think that's great. But then I hear things like earlier Jackson said he didn't know who's working on the set. You know, and so those, like, that's not very 3 C's. And so I think there's work to be done on behalf of DOT to kind of bring the fast planning and all of it, the MPOs in the state, into the fold a bit, into your processes, and acknowledge that we have authority over what those plans are in our MPAs.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is just, it's important to remember that the decision on authorities is with federal highways. They are the only entity that can make that final decision. And because they are the ones who tell us whether or not a project comes forward. So while it's the state and FHWA and there's back and forth, and this body does not determine authority. The state does not determine authority. Federal highways determines authority. And FTA, we like to drop them all at once. For not me.
Quick question, Ms. Little. You know, this is a letter, and you can say you don't have an answer to this. It's above your pay grade if you want. You know, we just got it a month ago. Does DOT agree or disagree with these positions from Highway? Do you know?
So that's the second letter. So we sent a letter back to Federal Highway
Oh, on March 5th, okay.
with additional questions and clarification of understanding.
So I think that, no, they probably don't agree.
There were a few things in there that I was surprised at the lens that was put on it, but again, and you know, so the regionally significant project, you guys mentioned a big project just outside your boundary. That is not a regionally significant project by law. It's an air quality exempt project by law. Is not a regionally significant project. The regionally significant project outside of boundary that's in question is the Silver Sewer Highway.
Mhm.
That's the only one in there in the state.
I'll read this one over next. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Kraft, for putting this on there and for everybody for that discussion. We're up to 7B, Metropolitan Planning Area Boundaries. Update from Alaska DOT and Public Facilities on the governor's approval of the new MPA boundary. I will look over to you, Ms. Little, for that one instead of Mr. Fox.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification, operating agreement updates are not necessarily tied to the
Right.
boundary. There is some question about attaching the new boundary, like a map or some sort of repeatable, so that boundary is attached to the operating agreement. That would be the only operating agreement amendment that we're talking about type boundary approval at this time. The Commissioner's Office has been working on it with law. We did successfully decouple it from the AMATS conversation. Their boundary is much more complicated to work through than the fast boundary. The last correspondence I had was, I think, yesterday. If you guys recall, what one of the commissioners asked was a legal description of the boundary. And so our right-of-way engineering group in Northern Region had taken that and made an attempt at doing a legal description, similar to what you would use, you know, for a property acquisition. Create some sort of legal description of this boundary. And it was a mess. So it, you know, you generated one out and then you tried to recreate it from that and you couldn't recreate it from that. And unfortunately, I was under the impression that that had been resolved, hadn't. So I'm working with, we don't really have much in the way of a Northern Region right-of-way engineering section due to retirements, untimely deaths. And so I'm working with the Central Region, the Anchorage-based right-of-way engineering lead for a way to describe this boundary in a way that's repeatable. And so that it has some definition beyond just, I went to the GIS and I saw, that's all we're working on there. Whether that's a PDF map or can we describe it in coordinates? That's the last piece for Ryan since it's spoke with the governor.
Mr. Kraft?
Oh, I was just gonna suggest, I know you have some staff that are pretty solid creating legal boundary definitions. I don't know if you wanted to offer some assistance.
I worked them hard as well, so we haven't had any,
I think we'll get it figured out.
Mr. Fox.
So we've had this discussion with the policy board many times. So you all should be aware, legal description is not required boundary. It's in the CFR, 23 CFR 453.12J. That the MPO boundary description shall be submitted either as a geospatial database or described in sufficient detail to enable the boundaries to be accurately delineated on a map. This is an or, this is not an and. Legal description is not required. And honestly, I mean, I'd like Olivia to chime in. I don't think it's necessarily possible or reasonable to come up with a legal description. It will be 80 pages long. It'll take
I
somebody.
agree completely,
Hold
Jackson.
Hold on, Mr. Lopez.
It will take somebody 120 hours to write this thing. And, you know, this boundary doesn't follow parcel lines.
Correct.
It's drawn based on an aerial photo and census blocks. And I mean, it's, we cross here, we cross there, we cross here. You can't write something on paper that, even if Olivia wrote it, so she drew the boundary, you couldn't give that to another person and have them draw me a map based on what you read. I don't think that that's possible. I don't, and it's not necessary to go to that level of effort. And it's not required by the regulation. I don't know of a single MPO in the US that is still creating legal descriptions. I mean, they did this or thing, I don't know what it was, 15 years ago. They changed the regulation to make it or because it was too burdensome for MPOs to create that. And that's not how the mapping exercise is done. So, anyways, I just really hope that that's not what's holding it back from going to the governor's office because it's not required. And I don't think it's a good use of anyone's time to try to create that. And Helen Spillman had made those comments to this very board.
I move to extend the meeting until 3 p.m.
Do we have a second? Second for Mr. Kraft. Any opposition? All right, sounds good. We're gonna go until 3. Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Ms. Fox, that's all. Did you want to chime in, Ms. Lunsford, on that, or you?
Yeah, I mean, my hesitancy would be the coming down to the piece of replicating it from a written description that would introduce a lot of room for error, and especially if it's coming from DOT where these conflicts are arising, I wouldn't just inherently say, yes, okay, this couples with what was drawn in the GIS. You want to talk about administrative burden, putting me behind a computer for 120 hours to try and recreate something that was made out of house. It's definitely not ideal, especially when it's not required in federal law. So
as we look at how we would move a map forward, if what we put forward is acceptable by federal law, I would guess have concerns without, then spending the time to verify what DOT is using as that specific map. If what we put forward is approved by federal highways or whoever needs to approve it at the federal level, that it works and meets that muster, we would be going back and forth for another bunch of years on the description of where it goes down, which lane or around which tree and down which side of the creek. You can look at how division of elections describes precincts. And I haven't looked in a while, but that does say, goes down to the creek and runs along the northern shore of the creek and crosses over at, the bridge to the north to south side of the creek, and it's a mess trying to track it. And I don't know exactly what DOT is looking for in terms of, physical like descriptions of it, but I guess I would have a concern that we are then attaching a map described by DOT as opposed to the one that has been approved by federal highways to any policy committees of what we're running with. So I think you know, I guess I don't want to rely, if that's what a DOT wants for an internal document, that's understandable or acceptable, but in terms of attaching it to something that's above and beyond what is required by the federal approval rate, I guess I'd have a concern about without many months more of discussions. We've had this on our table for DOT, you know, Commissioner Anderson's had it on his desk for well over a year, so that's my thoughts on that. Anybody, Ms. Lip?
So I just want to be clear, yeah, the legal description approach was, was one of those good ideas, right? And then you look at what comes out of it and you go, this was not a good idea. So we're trying to find something that puts that boundary into something repeatable so that, right now is go to FAST's website and see what they say it is, right? As opposed to the governor approving a concrete defined line. That could be as simple as taking the GIS and making PDF maps from that line. It could be as simple as taking the coordinate systems and generating a point file from that line that we all share. We're not talking about reinvent. We're just, how do we take the line that we have and make sure that it is documented and it stems from some of the issues that came up on the AMAT side. The AMAT's boundary is not a GIS line. It's a series of PowerPoint screenshots, for example. We need something repeatable and saying, yes, this is the boundary that we all signed and agreed to.
Mr. Fox, was it sent to forward as a geospatial database?
Yes,
Okay,
and DOT has it, one of their maps is in the packet.
Okay.
That red line, so it's been delivered to DOT. Federal Highways has it, Federal Transit Administration has it. Anybody that would like to use it has it as GIS files,
okay, thank you.
but it's not yet approved by the government.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on this? I guess, we've been waiting for a long time and being able to move forward on this is gonna be important, especially the way that conversation between the MPO directors and, Federal Highways was documented, in the staff report. I guess at this point, for the next meeting, I would request that an action item be put on there that if it has not been moved forward to the governor's desk for approval, and signed by the governor, in the next 30 days, that Mr. Fox deliver it directly to the governor. My understanding is the actual federal code and regs say it will be delivered to the governor by the MPO and not through Department of Transportation. So I'd like to see it signed and done in the next 30 days. And if not, then we move forward with that action item. So I'll request that that's on the agenda for the next time there's an action item for approval and vote by this board.
No.
Okay. With that, we're gonna move on to 7C, Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 2, Air Quality Conformity Determination.
Yep, I think we can make quick work of this one as well. So page 63 in the packet, I do have a staff memo to the board with suggested motion to make for this item. To refresh your memory, at your last meeting on February 25th, you did approve TIP amendment number 2. That was submitted to DOT for incorporation into the STIP the very next day on February 26th. As that advanced through different departments of DOT after the commissioner's office, there were communications between myself, DOT staff, and Federal Highway Administration staff that led to the request for the board to modify or add to the original motion you all made on February 25th to include a statement, to include an initial determination of air quality conformity. This is not something that we did for the last amendment to the TIP. Olivia, if you'll scroll forward to page 69. In the packet.
First.
So in the narrative of the TIP amendment document, we document our interagency consultation for air quality conformity, that we held a meeting prior to its public release on December 11th, that the agencies present at that meeting concur that a new air quality conformity analysis would not be required for the proposed changes to a TIP, but then a final determination will be made by Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration following close of the comment period. So typically that language has sufficed when we turn in these documents, it being in the narrative. But there was a request, which is outlined on page 64. You'll see the email back and forth between the three of us. where the Federal Highway Administration Alaska Division Office asked that, you all make that initial determination included as part of the motion. So to clean this up, to check all the boxes that I think we need to check, for our federal partners to make sure that they concur with that air quality determination. On the bottom of page 63, I've included a motion for you all to consider making today that I hope will suffice for our federal partners. So the motion would be that the policy board concurs with the preliminary finding of the interagency consultation group that a new air quality conformity analysis is not required for tip amendment number 2, and that the tip remains consistent with the previous conformity determination made jointly by our federal partners on November 20th, 2025. And happy to answer any questions. Or go to public comment via motion.
Any questions? Seeing none, let's move forward to public comment as noted by the director. Thank you for the reminder. Any public comment? None online, I'm guessing. All right, thank you. Seeing none, do we have any in the audience? Nope. All right, closing public comment. From there, do we have a motion to request additional, excuse me, a motion on tip amendment approval to include a determination for policy board. Anybody want to make a motion? Under 7C.
I move that the policy board concur with the preliminary findings to interagency consultation group that a new air quality conformity analysis is not required for tip amendment for 2, and the tip remains consistent with the previous conformity determination made jointly by Federal Highways and FDA on November 20th, 2025.
Do you have that, Ms. Dawn?
No.
Do you have that written down?
I can send it to you.
The board, this is down from the bottom.
Okay.
All right, we have a second, who seconded it? Sorry.
I second it.
Seconded from Ms. Little, thank you. With that, do we have any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, let's take ourselves a vote.
Okay, Mr. Krass.
Yes.
Mayor Church.
Yes.
Ms. Little.
Yes.
Mayor O'Neill.
Yes.
Mayor Hopkins.
Yes, Zarnicki's gone.
Okay.
So that's it, 5-0. Mr., I should note that, when did he leave? You open up the chat.
It said 2:20.
Mr. Zarnicki left us at 2:20.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't note that by now. And we got a 5-0 vote on item 7C. Thank you very much. Up next is 7D, electrical vehicle charging station project nominations. An action item as well.
Okay, beginning on page 76 here, this is your action items from the February 25th meeting, where we postponed the electric vehicle charging station nominations for a decision at this meeting here today. I understood my assignment from that meeting was to reach out to the private property applicants to obtain landowner letters for any of the sites that did not include that with the original application, because there were a few applications we received from vendors that was not actually from the property owner. So following that meeting, I did reach out to all of those applicants. Want to make note that the News Miner, their application had a landowner letter in it to begin with, so they were good to go. But I did reach out to Three Bears, Pikes, the property off Hillworks Avenue, and the property off Santa Claus Lane. I reached out to the applicants on that one. So, and Three Bears did get me back a letter, landowner letter. The other 3 were non-responsive. So we don't have a letter for Pikes, Hillworks Avenue, or the private property on Santa Claus Lane. Given that, couple updates to some tables. Page 83 in the packet shows you all of the project nominations that we received, and then the right-hand side, I added a landowner letter column there, so you can see how the News Miner and Three Bears, we have that landowner letter, and I did include those in the packet, so you can take a look at them, and then the 3 no's. And then what I did for you all was I put together a table for potential project bundles. This is on page 85 in the packet. So here's 3 different options for you all for today. The first one of which is the technical committee's recommendation. This would have been from, I think, their February 4th meeting. That you all advance just the public property locations. So that includes all of the nominations we received for public properties. The column in the middle is what we discussed at our last meeting, that we did not have the technical committee score all of these applications, but staff used the scoring rubric as updated by the technical committee and policy board. And the outcome of that, the highest scoring locations were Three Bears, the North Pole utility property, Pikes Waterfront, Downtown Visitor Center, Nolan Library, and Pioneer Park. But we've had a lot of discussion at technical and at policy board. And my gut says that we should go with the staff recommendation on the right. To fund the Daily News Miner location in lieu of the Borough Admin Center. Just because it's more exposed to, Illinois Street and public use. Three Bears in North Pole instead of the city of North Pole utility property. The Visitor Center, of course, in downtown, and then both libraries, the Nolan Library in Fairbanks, the North Pole Library at North Pole. In my mind, looking at our electric vehicle infrastructure deployment plan, it would be great if North Pole got some charging stations, and the library could be a level 2 charger and Three Bears could be a level 3 charger. So you got both options, in that community. And then Pioneer Park. And the only reason I excluded Carlson Center is due to the proximity to Pioneer Park. I think they can be redundant to each other, just like the News Miner one might be redundant to the one at the Borough Admin Center. So my gut says to go with these. It's kind of a combination of discussions and other potential project bundles. But it's all of your decision on what you would like to move forward with. So that's what I came up with. And it does show which locations would be excluded. And this question did come up for pre-policy yesterday. Well, with this project bundle, are we going to spend all the money? No, we will not. This would just be a phase 1 project bundle, and there will still be funding left over to do a phase 2. But to keep it kind of small and for DOT to get some experience underneath their belt, putting together a plan set for EV charging stations, try to deliver this. I think these are the best locations that we could pick for a first bundle, but that's subject to your all's discussion and changes.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Is the best list of the projects specifically, where they are between the technical committee, the staff scoring and staff recommendation? Is that on page 85?
85.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, the right hand column.
Okay. All right, well, public comment. Do we have any public comment on, do we have any questions for Mr. Fox? Before we get some discussions. Okay, do we have any, I guess I do, actually. In terms of funding for projects, do we have a limit on how many we could fund within what we received or have allocated for this?
Yeah, we have that in the packet to page 82. So we set aside 535,000 for design and then 1.7 million for construction. And then for level 2 charging station, it would be 136,000 per site. And then for a level 3 charging station, I think it's around 300,000. We have some emails from Ethan Grates in here. Yeah, 300,000.
And that includes design and construction?
Those are the construction costs.
Construction, you said it was 1.2? 1.3?
Sorry, we have 1.7 million available for construction.
Okay,
But yes, that's all in the package.
all right, we've got the mayors and assembly member, do we, want, with that, I guess we move on to, we have public comment, did I put public comment open yet? Do we have any, thank you, do we have any public comment from anybody online about the electronic charging stations, electronic vehicle charging stations? Anybody online? Seeing nobody come off mute, anybody in the room? Nope, all right, so thank you, everybody. Now we're gonna move to a motion. Do we have a motion so we can discuss this amongst ourselves?
Make a motion to move forward with the staff recommendations on the electric vehicle charging stations.
Second.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, do we, a discussion? Any discussion amongst the board members? Got some mayors and some people who don't know where they are.
Yeah, thanks to staff for going through this effort, kind of made it easy today.
Mayor Turk, did you have any comments?
No, I just echo the same thing. I appreciate you allowing this to be kicked the can down the road and for your diligence in reaching out to those private property owners who have expressed interest. And I think it's a great way for the public and private entities to come together and make things happen for our community. So thank you.
Well, Mr. Kraft?
Just echo those comments. Yeah, good work. I think it's a good list, and hopefully these are all successful and well used.
Mayor O'Neill, anything on your, okay? So I guess my one question, as I look at this, the Pioneer Park versus the Carlson Center was the only one I was thinking. Was the main reason sort of, similar location? Or was there,
No, there's more to it.
okay,
So the other reason is that when I scoring. Oh, I don't have it with me here. When I went through our scoring rubric, Pioneer Park far exceeded Carlson Center as far as the score. So, I'd have to go to the other room. I got the scoring sheet to look at the criteria of what gave it the most points. But I feel like the Carlson Center was 15 or 20 points lower than Pioneer Park.
okay. As you know, we all use Pioneer Park, we all use the Carlson Center for the most part. I'll avoid dig. I feel somebody goes to the Carlson Center for a few hours to go to a home show, to go to a game. Pioneer Park, you can go for a shorter time sometimes. Does anybody have a feel for how those two sites are used? In terms of, if an electric car owner wanted to go to one of those. It's a long walk to park at Pioneer Center, Pioneer Park to go to the Carlson Center. Mr. Kress.
Yeah, I've seen RVs towing electric vehicles, and that might be, that was what came to my mind was folks that were, showing up with the whole, kit and caboodle, and that they might hop off their little go around town rig and zip off. That was the first thing that popped in my mind. I've never, when I had young kids, I never managed to make it out of there in, under 2 hours. Yeah.
I think the parking at Carlson Center is often overflowing. And so if there was a way that there was some, somewhere else to park, that makes sense. I think that adds to, releasing some of that pressure parking, Carlson Center.
I would also like to say, in that Carlson Center block, you've got the curling club, you got the baseball game, the Go Panthers, and a lot of things that happen right there in that area. In the summertime, not such a big deal, but in the wintertime to walk in between Pioneer Park and, let's say, the Carlson Center for a hockey game. And they want to charge their vehicle, that may be further than they want to go. I don't really know.
You could walk there as fast as you can get out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Ms. Little.
Yeah, I think I'll echo what Grass said about, Pioneer Park, you see a lot of tourist use in the summer. You see the RVs parked there. It's kind of the staging zone in the summer. And then to Mayor O'Neill's point, Carlson Center, when there's activities, I don't know where you slice off a little space for people to charge their cars. I mean, it's competitive parking there. They've got events, and
That's not a
I
bad
think-
idea, yeah.
I think that may be asking too much of an already highly utilized space where there's Pioneer Park has a lot more margin, I feel like, to soak up some extra uses.
And as I think back to, with the winter and the snow piles that we've got right now, most of it is actually where, if I remember right, this charging station would be at Carlson Center, so. I consider myself convinced. Aaron, you did it again. Okay, so, all right. Well, I want to thank staff too for your work and having, very good rationale. So do we have a motion on the table for, number or letter D? For follow up on the landowners,
There wasn't a motion.
Yeah, we have a
yeah, we have a motion. All right, let's vote on the motion.
Mayor Church,
Yes.
Ms. Little,
Yes.
Mayor O'Neill,
Yes.
Mayor Hopkins,
Yes,
Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
all right. Let there be electricity. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we are on to, new old business 7E, Chena Riverwalk Stage 3 project update, with an action item. Mr. Fox, take it away.
Okay, this was another Again, on page 88, this was another agenda item from last month that was postponed. It wasn't necessarily postponed to this meeting, but it was.
Sorry, before we keep going, do we want to extend it beyond 3 again? Lauren says no. Or are we gonna be able to handle this and make it an action item in 8 minutes?
So this is an open action item. I'm not telling you to do one thing or another or whatever here today, but how about I present what the RAC committee gave to you all for recommendations? Julie Jones with Festival Fairbanks has been waiting here for 3 hours to have to offer some words under public comment. But to have a more robust dialogue, we may want to talk about this again in April for potential action, but would you like to provide comment after I give an introduction? Yes, okay. Okay.
That sounds good. We still might likely go past 3 o'clock, but
Okay.
that sounds good. Just stop the clock.
All right, so the highlight is, this was referred to the Walk, Ride, and Roll Advisory Committee. And we did set up a special meeting with them on March 13th, so that was last Friday. We got great attendance. There was only one committee member that was not able to attend. We did present to them the staff memorandum that I shared with you all on February 25th, pages 89 and 90 in the packet, regarding some decision points that you all need to make in relation to the design and overall cost of the project, maintenance, and funding. And then there's a few figures in here that we went through with the Walk and Roll Advisory Committee, but getting straight to the punchline, beginning on 95, is their opinions, comments, and list of recommendations to the board for this project. They really, it was a really great work session with them to come up with this. It was very productive. Everyone at the table had previously heard presentations or were familiar with the project. And they put it all out there for you. They gave us a lot of bullets and a lot of topics that we put up here. But they wanted to highlight for the board that this project has been supported by the community and local governments for 39 years now. The first resolution I found is from 1987. All of those resolutions from the Borough Assembly and City Council are included in your packet here behind this recommendations that they came up with. But they would like it to be a Riverwalk path. And they would like the board to move forward with acquiring that half-mile of riverfront between the pedestrian bridge and Pegger Road so that folks can have that Riverwalk experience. And to remind the board that phases 1 and 2 of the Riverwalk were constructed in 2003 and 2009, and this is the next stage. So this is phase 3. There would be maybe a future phase of this where we continue along the north side of the river to the east of the Carlson Center all the way to downtown with some more pedestrian bridges. They thought that this is an excellent alternative that kind of eliminates the issues with the undercrossing with the current bridge on Pegger Road, which is seasonally inundated. On the design and cost considerations, the next page, they discussed quite a bit about potentially having DOT consider issuing an RFP to a vendor for prefabricated sections of the boardwalk so that the contractor can put in helical pile foundation, and then prefabricated sections can be delivered to Fairbanks, and it's kind of plug and play, but that may help reduce the overall project cost. They talked about maintenance responsibilities, the fact that it's a given that the maintenance responsibility for the path along Pegger Road would be DOT's responsibility. The city's already taken responsibility of the pedestrian bridge that crosses the river at Pioneer Park. And so their thought is that the borough should take that middle section between the pedestrian bridge and Pegger Road. Of course. So all 3 governments participate in the maintenance responsibility. We did have a Parks and Rec employee at this meeting, and she expressed concerns from her department that we don't own, a structure like this. We don't know how we would maintain it. There's concerns, but that dialogue can play out as this conversation continues. They also stated that, if the borough's going to take on that maintenance responsibility, that they should be included as part of that design team to follow on that decision-making process, so that they have input on what they're going to inherit to maintain. More bullets on the right-of-way acquisition of the riverfront. Then it's important to restore community ownership of the riverfront that can be used for public use and transportation. And consistency with local plans, the project's been in the Chena Riverfront Plan for decades. It's been in our long-range transportation plan and our non-motorized transportation plan for decades. And it also supports the vision of the Pioneer Park Master Plan, expanding the relationship with the river and connectivity to and from that facility. So their overall recommendation, I'll read it out loud, go through with the land purchase, move forward with the design, criteria and cost, do it, not concerned about the price tag, and we need more opportunities for movement like this in the community. And again, those local government resolutions, they begin on page 99 in the packet, but just to refresh everybody's memory, this has been discussed and debated at length with the city council and borough assembly and supported year to year to year, decade to decade.
Thank you, Mr. Grass. Sorry, Mr. Grass. Mr. Potts, long meeting. Any questions? No, good. Opening public comment, Ms. Jones.
I'm Julie Jones from Festival Fairbanks. Just real quick, Festival Fairbanks brought this project for the North Side Chena Riverwalk forward to the railroad to build on their property with our conceptual design. It was pushed through and they asked their land office to work with Festival Fairbanks to forward the project. However, at that point, they said that Festival Fairbanks being a nonprofit organization, they would prefer to work with the municipality. So we brought the project over to the city of Fairbanks. They took on the project and we created a lease agreement with the city of Fairbanks, paying that annual fee to keep this right of way open for us to build the Chena Riverwalk. We thank Jackson Fox and his team for bringing forward all this funding from trail monies to get this done. And then, of course, when they decided to subdivide the property located near the Chena Landings Loop, they put the brakes on at the railroad again, and we weren't getting the support back from them. But we advocate that this board make an action item to move forward as soon as possible, because we would love to see this project be completed so we can finish the North Side Chena Riverwalk. Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Jones? All right, thank you. Thank you for your patience. All right. Any other comments, public comment? No, would we like to leave public comment open until the next time, or do we want to go ahead and close it?
So we should keep it open.
I think we should keep it open on this. Okay, I'm not gonna close public comments so that it remains open. Can you make a note that it's open when we come back, in case people want to make comments? Thank you for that. Well, we did do that in exactly 8 minutes. With that, we're gonna go ahead and, is there any other time sensitive ones, in terms of informational items, obligations, other issues? Do we have any policy board, do any taking action? We're gonna leave this item open and come back to it, next month.
Should we table it to time certain?
Postpone that, would we postpone it until time certain?
Yeah.
Next month. Motion to postpone that item where it stands, with public comment open. We have a motion for that till time certain for the next meeting.
Yep.
Second by Church, thank you both. And with that, do we have any policy board member comments? No, thank you all. All right, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, Grass 1, Mayor O'Neill 2. I heard you say no. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks for printing the rainbow.